Chapter 11:17. They talked a lot and talked about the original purpose of Yun Nua planet coming here. In the end, they talked about the past for a long time. It was not that it was bad or bad, but it was purely because the two of them were so indecent that they were practically a match made in heaven. They could talk about another topic in a few sentences, and then jump to another topic after a few sentences. In the middle, they could still maintain their words and thoughts without interrupting. In the end, they could still talk about the original topic. Then, they would talk about this and that and go astray again. It would be hard to believe that there was not a tacit understanding of billions of years in between. After finally saying everything in his heart, Yun Nuashing raised his head and looked at the sky. It was noon. Luli stood up and stretched. Holding his hand, she smiled and said, "Then let's do it. Even if you don't want to see it, I will tie you up and take you there." Yun Nuashing did not know whether to laugh or cry. Just as he nodded, he felt that the world was spinning. A moment ago, the sun was still shining in the sky, but suddenly, the surroundings dimmed. They appeared in a starry sky. In the dim starry sky, the starlight scattered here from an extremely distant place. This was the suburb of the starry sky, a deep space that was close to being extinguished. There were few stars, only a few starry dust and nebulae scattered unevenly in the star region. There was a strange ring-shaped device in front of them. It looked very simple. It was a huge iron ring, and its surface was engraved with the same huge runes and exquisite patterns. If it was a bracelet, the wrist of the wearer would have to be at least 100 million miles wide to wear this ring. There were 6 of the same metal rune rings. 3 of them were horizontally encircling the outer ring, and 3 of them were vertically encircling the inner ring. From the inner ring to the outer ring, each ring gradually shrank. They were located in the same center and were also encircling the outer ring. On each ring, there was a huge circular hole as thick as the ring at a certain distance. Those circular holes went straight through each metal ring and pointed to the center of the circle. In the core area of this strange structure, there was a cloud of fog, a cloud of starry sky fog. It was colorful and did not look like ordinary starry dust. It contained a huge and indescribable energy. It was most likely man-made. Yun Nuashing did not understand what the circle and the device on it were used for, but he had been with Navila for a long time, so he had some knowledge about it. Although this thing was definitely very different from the one he created, he could confirm after looking at it for a while that it was a device used to focus energy. Perhaps every huge circular hole was an energy source input point. When he thought of this, he thought of a deeper meaning. This was most likely used by Liuli to create that celestial weapon. He had also created a celestial weapon before. He had worked together with Guang and the others to create a world-type celestial weapon. He did not use these tools, but it did not prevent others from using it, right? "Welcome to my celestial forge." Azurite proudly puffed out her chest and said something that Yun Nuashing expected. But even so, he could not help but let out a pfft. He had dabbled in all sub-professions and had forged his own weapons. The Godhead weapons, and divine power weapons that he had were all forged by himself. But they were produced in different ways. The only thing he had never tried was using such a large forge. Yun Nuashing wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said, "Is there a need to use such a large forge?" "Of course there is a need. This is my best work. Everything has to be the best, even if it is just melting scrap." Azurite nodded as if it was a matter of course. As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her hand, and a huge starry sky array appeared from the surroundings, surrounding this huge starry sky forge from all directions. Every inch of the huge array seemed to be cast by a starry sky, flowing with light and color, extremely gorgeous and mysterious. Seeing this, Yun Nuashing broke out in a cold sweat. Damn it, this array was made by him. Celestial Rainbow Array. Hee, it's all thanks to Brother Yu. I couldn't have made such an exquisite array myself. Azurite smiled. Yun Nuashing rolled his eyes. Can your brain really make a divine weapon? You'll be confused if you take more than 20 steps. You'll die on the spot if you take more than 3 digits. You'll explode if you combine the two. Can you really afford it? It's true that your soul is very powerful, but you don't have to be so reckless. Tell me how many kilograms of scraps you need to refine, what you need to carve on every inch, and how many runes you need to inlay into the complementary materials. There are 60 celestial rainbow arrays here. The amount of star power you need to seize is… No. Don't read it. I don't want to hear it. Azurite broke down instantly. Seeing her breaking down and covering her ears, Yun Nuoshing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know if this celestial forge, that looked very glamorous and actually seemed very powerful, had been used before. If it was used by this idiot, wouldn't it explode? Shouldn't he hide a little further away? After Azurite finished howling, she glared at him fiercely. Seeing the emotions in his eyes, she couldn't help but mutter, "Brother, you don't worry. For today I've already exploded, practiced countless times. There won't be any danger. You just need to wait for me at the side." Yun Nuoshing's eyes twitched. He felt like he heard something dangerous. "You just wanted to say explode." Hiss. Lu Li pinched his waist hard and said, "You misheard." Yun Nuoshing sucked in a cold breath and shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Do whatever you want. If I'm not wrong, the things I've collected are actually scraps, right? Although they are very precious, and some of them are even some unique treasures in the world, they definitely don't need this huge project. They should have other uses or meanings." Azurite giggled. "As expected of Brother Yu. You're absolutely right. Those are just some base materials. But they are all condensation of rules that symbolize or represent a world. What I need are their rules and the bits of spirituality of that world that they contain. You want to use the condensation of rules of thousands of worlds as the core." Yun Nuoshing raised his eyebrows. "That's right. Then what's the main material?" Azurite pursed her lips and waved her right hand. Clusters of light the size of a fist emerged from the space. There were about 20 to 30 of them. When Yun Nuoshing saw clearly what was inside, his face turned pale. "What the f***ck? Those were 20 to 30 clusters of light. In other words, Azurite intended to use worlds as the main material and the condensation of rules of thousands of worlds as the core to forge a divine weapon. If this thing could be made, it would probably break countless rules. After all, the heavenly gods liked to exploit loopholes in the rules. This time would not make a difference." He was just shocked. He had thought of many things, and a lot of ideas flashed through his mind in 1 second. But he did not expect that the main material would be this at all. It was really unexpected and beyond imagination. "These are all clusters of light. I carefully selected them." Azurite waved her hand, and the 20 to 30 clusters of light touched each other lightly and bounced off each other like balls. They don't look different on the surface, but they are completely different inside. I chose worlds that were heading toward destruction or worlds that had just been born and had not yet formed. I fixed them at that moment, the moment of destruction and rebirth. There were also worlds that I carefully created and filled them with various kinds of energy. In the end, they became the materials you see. Yun Nuoshing's cheeks twitched uncontrollably. "What the f***ck? How exaggerated is this? Since ancient times, not many people have such courage." No, this was not a matter of courage. This was a matter of imagination. Who would think of using the entire clusters of light as materials to melt them? Even a normal person would not think of this. Even a lunatic like him would not think of such an exaggerated thing. He did not expect that this achievement would fall on Azurite's head. Why don't you lend me the Ling Hong sword?" Azurite whispered. "What the f***ck? What if you blow it up? This is the second most powerful divine weapon." "You are willing to blow it up?" Hiss. You are really willing to bite it. Azurite bit his shoulder fiercely and licked her saliva. She snorted and threw his head away. Who told you to talk nonsense? You also said that the Ling Hong sword is the second most powerful divine weapon. How can I use it for bad purposes? I am just using it as a backup to stabilize the situation. Yun Nuoxing rolled her eyes. She thought for a while and decided to tell the truth. Actually, what I want to say is that the creation of the 48 divine weapons on the divine weapon ranking list does not require the assistance of any other divine weapons. Although I don't care about this, you actually want to surpass them, at least surpass most of them, right? Azurite lowered her head and muttered. She raised her head and said, All right, I know. I won't use it. I will think of a way myself. Actually, it is not a big problem. I am mainly worried that the control of the energy during the creation process is too great. It will cause the space to collapse and the energy will be broken, which will affect the result. Don't worry. The neon array that I created back then has the function of stabilizing the space. You just need to use a little bit of your mind to control it, Yun Nuoxing said. She tilted her head and looked at the huge magic formation that looked like a fragment of space. The neon array was originally used to condense the power of an entire star. I didn't expect that you would use it to create a divine weapon. No, wait a minute. Ring, circle, hole, neon array. Wow, you are not thinking of. That's the one. Azurite gave her a thumbs up and grinned. Yun Nuoxing's face changed in an instant. Before she could say anything, she waved her hand and an unimaginable amount of energy suddenly gathered in this part of space. The colorful clouds that were wrapped in 3 layers of metal rings gradually emitted a bright light. Space and time collapsed towards the center from all directions. It was as if a black hole had been created, violently devouring everything, especially the free energy. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The 6 rings slowly opened up a little. The extremely huge patterns and lines on the surface released a bright light. The neon array slowly rotated at this moment. The dim and empty space suddenly lit up with dense spots of light. Yun Nuoxing saw those spots of light. It was as if the sky that was covered by dark clouds had suddenly cleared up. Little bits of bright starlight suddenly descended. That was the enormous power of the stars that had crossed the starry sky and rushed here. The endless power of the stars madly rushed into the neon array. Then, it exploded along the center of the magic formation and a few holes, converging into a huge energy torrent that could illuminate the entire star region. The energy that carried the power of the stars of the entire star region passed through the holes in the rings and was branded by the patterns on the metal rings. Then, the huge energy torrent crashed into the cloud of incomparably bright starry dust. The huge amount of energy disturbed the dust cloud. It began to surge and gradually solidify. The almost infinite energy instantly rushed to the center of the cloud. Then, the energy began to condense and crazily compress. The torrent of star energy from all directions condensed into hundreds of streams and rushed into the starry dust. The condensed starlight was blazing to an extreme temperature, but it did not seem hot in this place. The runes and charms isolated the super-powerful energy that could melt the earth and the starry sky. The center where the endless energy gathered became brighter and brighter, as if a star was being born. Go! When the light there became intense for a moment, Luli shouted softly and waved his hand to throw in thousands and tens of thousands of materials. Among them were the unique treasures that he asked Ning Qianxue and the Golden Princess to bring from the Book of Myriad Realms. Those extremely precious items only lasted for less than 10 seconds in the starry sky power pulled by the neon array. They instantly melted and disappeared from the observable world. The remaining rules flowed like water and gathered at the center of the dust cloud along with the tens of thousands of troops. Yun Nuoxing did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that there seemed to be more than 20 light clusters mixed in with the galaxy that Luli threw out just now. Wow! He threw in the materials together. Yun Nuoxing was silent. This guy recklessly used such a large piece of equipment to refine a divine weapon. Was he planning to perish together with him? But it's not a big problem. That's all. It's the same whether it's early or late. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 round. Then, those metal rings came to a rigid halt with a rumble. They slowly rotated in another direction, and the heavy weight caused even the starry sky to tremble. Yun Nuashing took a deep breath. Boom! Muffled thunder came from the deep space of the star sector, causing Yun Nuashing's expression to change slightly. He turned his head to look at the depths of the stars in the distance. It was an exceptionally brilliant scene. All the light in this starry sky was converging here. That was the power of trillions, tens of trillions, or even more stars converging here. His colorful eyes emitted a bright light as he looked at the deep space in the distance. The stars were shining so brightly that they were almost brighter than the moment of creation. The entire starry sky became scorching hot, and his eyes could capture the light. He saw countless rays of light forming an ocean of light that streaked across the endless starry sky and passed by him. Then, they entered the rings along the neon rainbow array. At a certain moment, his expression suddenly changed. He casually waved his hand in front of him and actually caught a solid object. He opened his hand, and lying in his palm was a 1-foot-long fragment. It was a fragment of the star sector that fell from the starry sky like broken glass, bringing with it a vast galaxy. With the world as the raw material, the world naturally needs to be ignited and burn everything. Yun Nuashing pondered for a moment and let go of his hand. The fragment of the star sector rushed into the center of the array and fused into the scorching and brilliant light. In the fragment, in the light ball, he felt an endless amount of energy from the origin. It even contained the power of the world and the power of the primordial realm. The condensed energy had already torn the space into pieces. Perhaps in the entire starry sky, only the space in front of him was still stable. The other places had already become a mess. The scorching dust cloud had already disappeared. Now, the light of the entire starry sky had gathered there. Strange phenomena burst out from it, and there was constantly monstrous energy bursting. A bolt of energy that had condensed into a solid object streaked across tens of thousands of miles and turned into a solid colorful fragment that shattered. The enormous energy and pressure compressed it back into the light ball. The scorching light ball was extremely dazzling, and the scorching energy arc shot out for billions of miles. They seemed to be standing on a star's crown, and in front of them was a superstar that was about to explode. Its light was so bright that it could be seen by the entire starry sky. It had even surpassed the object of a star. Yun Nuashing felt that he was watching the moment of creation, but the scene in front of him was countless times more brilliant than the flash of creation. Boom! Originally, no sound could be made in the starry sky, but he could feel that a terrifying thing was brewing in the scorching light ball. There were several extremely terrifying energy flashes that almost caused this irritable thing to explode. That was the phenomenon of more than 20 world light balls being melted. More than 20 worlds were forcefully stuffed into the light ball, causing it to become extremely irritable. This world had also become chaotic. The capacity of this world had exceeded its limit, and it would even disintegrate from the inside out. Under the control of Azure, the 6 metal rings slowly and orderly split into countless parts. The irritable light ball in the center seemed to be giving birth to a star. Yun Nuashing could see a sphere that distorted reality and the conceptual layer of the rules there. His eyes looked at the center and felt that it was burning. Countless mottled and magical energy phenomena were transforming into a solid form, and then disintegrating in an instant. He even felt that this world was collapsing towards that center. As the metal rings separated, the irritable light ball was also expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. It continued to expand as the rings continued to disperse outwards. Its volume had expanded by several times in just a dozen seconds. Yun Nuoxing felt that space and time had solidified into a solid form, transformed into a tangible form by the highly compressed energy. Let's step back, Luli whispered and pulled Yun Nuoxing back. His line of sight had never left the light and the starry sky. Now, he did not need to open the eye of the ocean to see the gathering of trillions of starlight. Countless rays of light shone on the spherical area in front of him, condensing into a new sun. The two of them quickly retreated and flew a long distance. When they passed a boundary point, Yun Nuoxing felt that his body was slightly empty. The countless scorching rays of light that filled his body seemed to have disappeared, and the brilliant golden sea of light faded from his eyes. He looked carefully and found that they seemed to have floated out of a star corona. They had been in the core of this sun all this time. After breaking away from the star corona, Yun Nuoxing could observe the situation of this starry sky better. It was really unprecedentedly bad. All kinds of origin energy and primordial elements were in a mess. This is not good. Yun Nuoxing pulled Azure's hand and pointed at the chaotic starry sky. This world is going to be chaotic. Oh, it's normal operation. No problem, no problem. Azure seemed to have recovered a lot of energy and answered more cheerfully. She gave a thumbs up and grinned foolishly. Brother, you don't worry. No problem. Boom. A large piece of space fragment, the size of an entire galaxy, rumbled and shattered in the distance. The sound directly penetrated their ears, giving the two of them a fright. Then, they saw that the fragment was sucked into the constantly expanding sun by a powerful and nearly limitless force, disappearing without a trace. Yun Nuoxing looked at Azure calmly. The latter laughed awkwardly, probably. You're going to sacrifice this world, right? Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath. I didn't plan to do that at first. Azure was embarrassed and smiled awkwardly. But if I can't control it, I can't do anything, right? Then I'll add one more. Anyway, the raw materials are the same. Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. This guy really hadn't changed, even after 70 years. He acted without any plan and didn't even consider the consequences. The constantly expanding sun was like a balloon, and the star crown was leaking air crazily. Streams of energy that were hundreds of millions of miles wide gushed out, and endless energy surged in. Large pieces of world fragments fell into it, and even a piece of the world barrier of Unua planet could be seen falling in. At this moment, this world was already riddled with holes, and the power of the void was pouring in from all directions. It was like a sea that covered the sky. The violent purplish-black and black torrents broke into the world light ball and swallowed everything. The void is rushing in. Yun Nuoxing reminded. He wasn't worried. With his eyesight, he could see that the blazing sun had formed a powerful law domain and wouldn't be swallowed by the void. Instead, he was worried that the void would be eaten by it. As expected, Azure waved her hand and said nonchalantly, "Don't worry. I'll eat as much as I can." In the next second, Yun Nuoxing saw a planet with a radius of 30,000 miles plunge into the light ball and disappear. The energy field there could even tear the world apart. A mere planet wasn't even enough to fill the gap between the teeth. In the end, they couldn't see this anymore. A large sea of light was pressing toward them. Azure sensed what was about to happen in advance. Yun Nuoxing was a second or two later, but he also realized something. The former pulled him and disappeared from this part of the starry sky. The moment the two of them disappeared, the endless sea of void tore the world barrier and rushed into the world light ball, drowning everything in the void. Chapter 11:18. In the dark void, a ball of light suddenly flashed. It shook a few times in the void, and then the light gradually dissipated. Two figures emerged from the ball of light. Yun Nuoxing saw the dark void. He was at a loss for a moment, and then hurriedly closed his eyes to organize what had just happened. After a while, he came back to himself. He opened his mouth and breathed out a golden energy smoke ring. "So exciting, isn't it?" Fun, right? Luli grinned. Yun Nuashing knocked her head and rolled his eyes. But how can forging a divine weapon be exciting? Do you think you can create a world-shaking aura just by eating a meal? Luli held her head, feeling wronged. Hearing that, she could not help but look at him and said righteously, Sister Hua had such an aura when she ate back then. Yun Nuashing. That girl is an exception. Don't try to bluff your way out of this. This trick is useless. How can you make a heavenly weapon and blow up an entire world? Heh, isn't sacrificing more than 20 worlds not enough? Why did you have to blow up the world that you made as well? Anyway, I made it myself. There is no life in it. If it blows up, so be it. Brother you are so long-winded. Yun Nuashing still wanted to say something, but Luli pressed her hand on his mouth in advance and said with a smile, All right, it's scary but not dangerous. Everything is under control. After all, the balls of light that I made are for use. I don't intend to nurture life. Let's not talk about this for now. She raised her hand and waved at the empty void. A fist-sized bright white spot of light appeared in the void and then flew toward them. That spot of light kept releasing rings of colorful cloud-like energy. It was like a deep nebula. It was very beautiful, shining, and very eye-catching in the void. Yun Nuashing looked at the colorful spot of light and then looked at Luli. Is this the residue that was left just now? Did the forging fail? No, brother you are so stupid. Luli shook her head and took the light. Look. The light fell on her palm and wriggled like a ball of soft mud. Gradually it changed. Its light kept spreading out and condensed into a solid object. It became slender and long. The structure in the middle was slender and long. It was 2 meters long and could be held tightly with one hand. Yun Nuashing sized it up. It was not a sword. According to the shape, it should be a scepter or a spear. He did not wait for long. The 2 ends of the slender light changed at the same time. A wide part condensed at one end and was divided into 2 parts. There was only a gap of 2 to 3 centimeters in the middle. The part on the right side was slender and sharp, like the tip of a spear. On the other end of the spear, another part condensed at the end of the slender structure. It also looked like the tip of a spear, but it was relatively short. Moreover, there were 3 rings that kept shrinking from top to bottom. The last ring was wrapped around the tip of the spear, and it would become a vague shape of a solid ring. If it covered the tip of the spear on the other end, it would look like a scepter. Yun Nuashing frowned. For the time being, he could not tell what this thing that looked like a spear and a scepter was. Luli looked mysterious and did not intend to tell him, so he could only hold back. In his experience of several eras, he had seen many strange weapons. He had also seen weapons with similar shape. However, there was no model in his mind that was similar to the one in front of him. He could not use it. Luli reached out and pinched the golden light, changing it slightly. Yun Nuashing was dumbfounded. She could even pinch it herself. He could not understand the forging method of the heavenly god of origin. No, he felt that he could not learn this girl's forging method. At least, he had never tried to create a divine weapon that could destroy an entire world. He had made something more dangerous in the past, but it was not as terrible as this girl's. Okay, it's almost done. A minute later, Luli clapped her hands in satisfaction. The wriggling golden light suddenly froze. Different colors began to appear from the center of the handle. The golden light began to fade, and a layer of silver sparkling starlight was born from it. It quickly spread to both sides, and the 3 rings at the end of the handle solidified. They were 3 rings that looked like fragments of a star region. There was a faint ring formation around each of the 3 rings. The light was dim, and if one did not pay attention, one would only see a black star region. At the end of the ring was a diamond-shaped crystal that was the same size as the handle. It was also shining with the color of the star region. The shape of the other end did not change. It looked like a blade of a giant axe, but the blade of the axe and the blade of the sword were integrated into one. It was not as large as the traditional blade of an axe. It was slender and narrow. The gap between the two blades was constantly spewing out the light of the star region and star particles. That's fast. Yun Nuoxing could not help but exclaim. The creation of a divine weapon was different from other weapons. It did not take much time, and the creation was just the beginning. As for what kind of changes it could have, it would depend on the individual's luck. The limitations of the material would not hinder much. Other weapons would be as they were when they were created. While they were not completely fixed, there was not much room for growth. But what is this? Yun Nuoxing asked curiously as she reached out to touch the weapon. Luli looked up at the void and shook her head. I can't remember. I remember that I saw a similar weapon in another world. I modified it with a little of my own. The core at the bottom is the secondary energy core of the divine weapon. It is connected to the void, and the main core communicates with all of the origin energy. It can also connect to the concept layer of the laws. Its energy is almost infinite. However, if it uses too much energy for a long time, it will enter a state of silence for a short period of time. When that happens, you will need to input your own energy to control it. It is recommended that you supplement it with your own energy when you use it. Luli held it in her hand and waved it around. Out of 10, I'll give it a 9. It's a pity that with so many materials, it can't reach a perfect state. I've been collecting them for many years. Brother you can slowly explore the remaining functions, Luli said as she placed the long-handled weapon in Yun Nuoxing's hand. She smiled. The latter took the weapon and was about to take a closer look when he heard what Luli said. You're giving it to me." He stared blankly at the weapon that was both a spear and a staff. For a moment, he did not react. He wanted to talk about the matter of weapon refinement, but he was disrupted by Luli's words. "Yes." Luli nodded matter-of-factly. Her jade-like hand gently stroked his hand that was holding the weapon. She said, "Since the first time you entered the pavilion of gathering fate, my seal had begun to be lifted. At that time, I knew that you were a divine body of the receptive soul and happened to be in the awakening period. From then on, I collected additional materials, intending to craft a divine weapon for you. Mainly, I was a little worried when I saw that the Nethervoid sword was broken. Counting up, the other divine bodies of the receptive soul are lacking in weapons. At least, I wanted you to bring one with you to protect you. I didn't expect it to take so long." Yun Nuoxing scratched his head. "But I'm not lacking now. I still have a little more," Luli said. "That's true." As she said that, she could not help but frown. She said softly, "Who asked you to take so long? Those rare treasures that I asked you to collect are the energy nodes that this divine weapon uses to communicate with the concept of rules. They are like beacons. Without them, its power will be greatly reduced. I've been waiting for you to come, but after so long you didn't come. You only know how to play with other girls." As she said that, her voice was filled with grievance. Yun Nuoxing saw her sad expression and could not help but smile bitterly. "I'm not, The next second, Luli raised her head and looked at him with a smile. She did not look sad at all. "The underground palace was fun, right? I was watching you guys at that time. Hee brother, you also learned my Luli divine art." Yun Nuoxing's expression was indifferent. After this girl came back to life, she became heartless. He wondered who was the one who was still crying 6 hours ago. This point really did not change at all. However, it was better for him not to mention it. Otherwise, he would inevitably suffer a headbutt. With this girl's current skills and his defensive power, she could push him to the boundary of the plane with a single headbutt. He suddenly looked down and saw that her black hair reached his chest. He could not help but sigh. The girls around him had all grown very tall. Not to mention the 2 stupid dragons who were taller than him. Xian was at the same height as him. Other than Little Purple Soul, Xian, Shi Yun, Yi Shi and a few other little girls, only Yuer was at his height. However, that girl could only bury her face in his shoulder. The others could only be taller, not shorter. Looking at it this way, Luli's height was just right. She could support his chin with her hand. He could not help but reach out and pat her head. He muttered to himself, this is a familiar height. It's so convenient. As soon as this sentence came out, he was stunned for a moment. He calmly lowered his head and saw Luli's pretty face, which was so dark that it was shining. He recalled what he had just said and shuddered in his heart. He had already started to plan the route and planned to fly back from the middle plane. If he worked harder, he might be able to fly back before the world fragment came crashing down. Thinking of this, he nodded and began to beg for mercy. Please be gentler. Luli gritted her teeth and looked at him. She raised her head and used her head to hit him. That power caused even the void to retreat. So what if I didn't grow taller? Half an hour later, Yun Nuoxing was carried back to the Jiuan pavilion by Luli. As he expected, he was hit by the head of a hammer and had no idea where he was. The starry sky furnace that exploded was a desolate world that existed alone. In the end, when he came back to his senses, he saw a huge world group in front of him. Yun Nuoxing trembled and rubbed his chest. Luli ignored him and snorted softly. Then, she said, it seems that the Pantheon world has been a little chaotic recently? Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath. His chest was still stuffy. The Pantheon world is still alright. But the outside world is going to be chaotic. I found something terrible earlier. It's related to the Dark Age. He told her about the Abyss Death Mist, and the chaotic war that spread across the entire Yuan realm, as well as the Tide of Darkness. Abyss Death Mist. It's really an ancient thing. After hearing this, Luli frowned slightly and revealed a troubled expression. Seeing this, Yun Nuoxing was stunned. She only expressed her distress and confusion, but did not express her surprise. In other words, she more or less knew about this. Is it strange? Seeing Yun Nuoxing's strange look, Luli smiled faintly. It's true that there were bits and pieces of the mythological era in that puppet, but there were also some things that happened during the Dark Age. It's not much, but it happened to mention the Abyss Death Mist. It was recorded by a third party, and it didn't say much. It happened a long time ago, and it was something that happened on the front lines of a warrior. I didn't pay attention to that part of my memories until I became an Empyrean god of origin. One day, when I was sorting out my memories, I saw the Abyssal Death Mist. Out of curiosity, I wandered around the void, but, I'm not good at finding clues. Furthermore, it was something that happened 2 years ago, so I got impatient when I couldn't find anything, and then I stopped looking. Then I started to become impatient. Yun Nuoxing glanced at Luli, who was laughing dryly. You're impatient. Your patience is like a curve. When you become patient depends on your mood at that time. Luli rolled her eyes at him and continued, but I still found something. It should be something that didn't leave behind any records. I found it in the void. How did you find it in the void again? Not to mention the 2 great reincarnations, there shouldn't be anything left in the void. Although the Empyrean god's creation could last for a long time in the void, it would definitely melt after millions of years. How could there be anything left behind? Luli's expression was solemn. What if something above the Empyrean god is left behind by the Empyrean god of origin? Yun Nuoxing's expression changed. According to what she had just pointed out, the Empyrean god of origin seemed to be able to break free from the shackles of the greater Yuan realm. Whether it was the order or the laws, the shackles would at least be weakened. If the Empyrean god of origin's creation was left in the void. Seeing the change of expression on his face, Luli said faintly, the Empyrean god of origin's creation has the power to distort reality. Even the void has to avoid it. It is already a transcendent being, a beast out of the cage. Of course, most of the records I found have disappeared. It's not completely indestructible in the void. It's just that it took a very long time. Moreover, it stayed in the depths of the void very, very far away. It was probably slapped there by an external force. It just happened to escape the encirclement of the abyssal death mist and the tide of darkness. Luli stretched herself and continued. What was recorded was the words of an Empyrean god of origin. So I speculate that it was thrown out from the center of the void of the eight elements realm. The remaining information that was relatively clear mentioned the abyssal death mist and the tide of darkness, as well as some unknown things. That guy was also a fierce man. He fought his way into the enemy's camp against the abyssal death mist. It didn't say how he got in, but it did say this. It's very interesting. Yun Nuoxing's expression flickered. Enemy's camp, the base of the abyssal death mist and the tide of darkness. In other words, it was indeed a force that existed in this world? Just like the ancient and unknown force that the thing he encountered back then provoked? No wonder it could overturn the entire eight elements realm by itself. If it was them, they should have the same power. Seeing that he was a little excited, Luli gently pressed his hand and said, Brother Yu, the tide of darkness probably has nothing to do with them, because they have different marks of laws. I know. I've faced the tide of darkness and the abyssal death mist. I already know a little about it. Let's not talk about this first. Did the record mention where the tide of darkness came from? Yun Nuoxing waved his hand. Luli took a deep look at him, pondered for a moment, and nodded. The neighbor of the realm of gods, the underworld. Yun Nuoxing slightly widened his eyes. He opened his mouth a few times but could not say anything. Only strange words leaked out from his throat. He knew that Luli would not make fun of him. If there was no problem with the record, then it was probably true. However, the Empyrean god of origin that suddenly killed its way into the enemy's camp sounded somewhat suspicious. However, his intuition told him that this might be the correct answer. After all, it was the information left behind by the Empyrean god of origin, and no matter how much of a conspiracy it was, it had nothing to do with them. So, he quickly dispelled the many doubts in his mind. And if it was really the underworld, then many things could be solved. The underworld was originally the companion realm of the realm of gods. Although the people of the two realms had never interacted with each other, you could not ignore the existence of your neighbor even if he did not go out. The commotion caused by his neighbor would always reach your ears. See, during the Dark Age, your neighbor did something earth-shattering. Good Lord, it directly destroyed the Grand Yuan realm. It was true that the realm of gods was surrounded by a barrier of order, but it was a kind of conceptual and order-based protection. Although it stood there in reality, the barrier only separated the concepts of the two places inside and outside the realm of God. People outside the realm of gods knew about the realm of gods, but all their directional thoughts about the realm of gods would become vague. They would not even think about going to the realm of gods, nor would they think about living there. They would not even think about where the realm of gods was because the realm of gods had become a meaningful and practical name. However, it only existed in the imagination. So, no one would treat it as real and pursue it. However, the netherworld was different. The netherworld was a neighbor, and was only separated from the god realm by a single wall. Frankly speaking, the netherworld could be considered family, so the barrier of order naturally didn't isolate the netherworld from the god realm. This was why he was able to accurately throw an incomparably large and powerful brick from the middle plane to the god realm. What was wrong with a naughty brat throwing a rock into his own home? Although what he threw was not a pebble but a brick, and currently, no one could hang him up and give him a good beating. The neighbor came to tear down your house? Yun Nuoxing asked subconsciously. No, the neighbor tore down the Diyuan realm. Azurite shook her head. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. After thinking about it, his face became even more bitter. He spread his hands helplessly. It's useless even if we know the name. We don't know where the underworld is. Even if we know where the underworld is, we can't fight our way in. Even if we are lucky enough to fight our way in, we will only end up being surrounded and beaten to death by thousands of soldiers. That's right. Azurite pouted and said, I don't have the memory of the battle in the Dark Age, so I don't know about this. But I know another piece of information that will make Brother you feel even worse. Ah, right, I remember now. There are records about this. Because it was not useful, it was sealed for too long and forgotten. Yun Nuashing was slightly stunned. He shook his head helplessly. This brat was as reckless as ever. What did you forget? The Lord of the Underworld is a heavenly god above the origin god, the primeval god. Azurite sighed and shook her head helplessly. These are all realms of the mythological era. I took a glance at it. Because I felt that it might not be useful, I threw it into the depths of my memory and sealed it. I couldn't remember these things for a while. During the Dark Age, no one knew if the primeval god had appeared. But combined with what Brother you just said, I don't think so. The thing inside the white light was most likely the Lord of the Underworld. That was why it had the ability to pierce through the entire Deyuan realm alone. The realm of the gods in the Dark Age was proven to have the origin god, but what was the use of that? They were all destroyed. Yun Nuashing's expression suddenly became absent-minded. He muttered unnaturally, the beginning of the primeval realm. The primeval is the origin. I'm a little dizzy. What should I do? I feel that the road ahead is not only endless, but also a dark abyss. He only felt that it was funny. What was all this? After climbing over a small hill to look at the scenery, what he saw when he looked back was an even more exaggerated peak. It was daunting, and there was fear in his heart. He felt that he could not climb up at all. These realms existed in name only in this era. There were only 5 heavenly gods, and 1.5 origin gods. As for the primeval god, forget about it. It was better to just think about it. There were probably some transcendental forces that were so reclusive that they could suffocate themselves to death. For example, the underworld, or them. There was no need to talk about the former. With the power of the realm of the gods, they probably had never suffered the calamity of the great samsara. They had countless opportunities to rest and recuperate. That was why they jumped out to cause trouble during the Dark Age, and then came out again after almost 80 years. Those bastards really did cause trouble whenever they wanted to. Even when they came out for a stroll, they had the momentum to destroy the world. Chapter 11:19. What actually happened during the Dark Age was something that could not be explored. Even Azurite, who had experienced or at least watched from the side, would not know. The phantom marionette had been damaged when it was retrieved, and the information it contained served as a guide, at least allowing Yun Nuashing and the others to know something that no one else knew. Coincidentally, this stupid thing would probably happen again, not to mention that the information would definitely be useful, but at least they would know who would die in the hands of if they were to die in battle in the future, right? They would die without knowing why. Yun Nua planet had already tried hundreds of millions of times, and they were blown up together with the entire world, dying without knowing anything. He could not help but stare blankly at the thought. At the time, Zero had watched him being blown up along with a world of light in the mortal realm. In other words, those who went down to carry out the execution gods were probably of the level of the Empyrean god of origin, or even higher. After all, he had been to the triple elemental realm before, and the protection and suppression from the first great heavenly god prevented him from squeezing out enough energy to destroy an entire world. In other words, they were probably of the level of the Empyrean god of origin. According to Azurite, she was already able to partially ignore the rules of the grand elemental realm and the realm of gods, so the protection of the first great heavenly god should more or less offset some of it. Underworld, returning to the original topic, Yun Nuashing stretched himself. I'm not mentally prepared to face my old neighbor in the future. Speaking of which, can we assume that they just threw a brick over and did not? Alright, I'll be serious. The tide of darkness has already appeared, and regardless of whether the Void Shroud is destroying the world layer by layer according to its original route and plan, it has already destroyed a lot of worlds and infiltrated 3 planes. Now, the people of the underworld are probably watching the progress bar, waiting to see when it reaches 50 or 60% before jumping out and attacking the center of the void in the 8th elemental realm. But I really don't want to do that right now. Luli looked at him helplessly and shook her head. In just a few hours, she had seen him change little by little. He, who had once been able to focus on his own heart without wavering in the endless years, was now a little shaken. He had become a little dispirited, a little self-destructive and discouraged. He would do whatever she said without asking questions or asking questions. He would just sigh and take everything she said as the truth. It was just like how he used to be in her heart. Everything he said was right. Of course, even at this moment, Luli's heart had never changed, but he, brother you. Luli gently held Yun Nuoshing's hand. Her red lips moved, but she could not make a sound. His eyelids drooped slightly, and his originally straight body seemed to bend a little. The expression of someone who was past his prime and had experienced the vicissitudes of life appeared on his face. He seemed to have lost his drive and fighting spirit. This made Luli very worried, but she did not know how to solve it. Yun Nuoshing looked at her worried face and knew that the negative emotions in his heart had piled up on his face. However, this was not something that could be overcome by clenching his teeth. If he could get through this by clenching his teeth, he would not be in such a state. Back then, the heavenly god of primal chaos also felt a little powerless. Things that he could not control kept popping up one after another. Perhaps this was the result of him not trusting this world. However, he had seen the combat strength of the divine realm. What could he rely on to trust this world? He had hypnotized himself that someone would definitely jump out to help him at a critical moment. Save it. Even his dreams were more realistic than this. The one who jumped out was not a cabbage. It had to be a heavenly god who could suppress the void, or even the heavenly god of origin. Slap. Slap. Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath and slapped his cheeks hard with both hands. He closed his eyes and let his eyeballs roll around a few times. Then, he exhaled and opened his eyes. What a headache! Luli's expression lit up slightly when she saw him. He had pulled himself together. However, he was just forcing himself to stay strong. This was his strength. He would force himself to stay strong until he could no longer hold on. He would go crazy, force himself into a dead end, and then be trapped in the box. This kind of state could pull himself together in the short term, but he had begun to ignore the consequences. Yun Nuoshing waved his hand. The light in the depths of his eyes flickered. His 2 diamond-shaped pupils turned very quickly and had already become a strange vertical pupil. He looked at Luli and said, "What do you plan to do?" Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath and looked straight into her eyes. The current situation is very serious, but I can't tell how serious it is. Let's just treat it as a world-ending disaster. However, the world-ending here is the 8 elements realm or the great elemental realm. I know you know that I don't trust this world. Yes, I don't trust it. If I wait for others to solve everything, it will be too late by the time everything happens, let alone now where the rules have withered. I don't have much time to believe in what this world can have, but my own strength is not enough to push or fight for anything for myself. Let me be frank. Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath and looked straight into her eyes. Luli, I need you. At least, for the present that I cherish, I have to do my everything. Luli's 7-colored eyes blinked. After a moment, she smiled sweetly, making this part of the world extremely bright. She nodded hard and said, "Okay." After getting a response, Yun Nuoshing also nodded. He looked up at the sky and said, Do you plan to stay here or go to the Nine Gods Temple with me? Luli thought for a moment and shook her head. Since Brother Yu is going to make a move, I also need to make some preparations. I won't go to the Nine Gods Temple with you. However, you can find me at any time. That spear has the power of my godly right and godhood left behind. You can find me, unconditionally. Yun Nuoshing looked at the spear that was standing beside him like a spear. He thought for a moment and understood something. His expression became strange. You're planning to keep this thing to monitor me, aren't you? Lu Li's body trembled. She turned her head guiltily and said, No. You're thinking too much. Yun Nuoshing stared at her with a faint smile. He didn't say anything, but there was nothing he could say. He had already eaten the spear. He was just curious whether this girl had any plans. He had already gotten the answer. The girl's face became redder and redder under his gaze. Finally, she couldn't help but lower her head and mutter, I'm just worried that you'll disappear. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this answer. He shook his head helplessly and said, The void is so big, but it's only so big. With your current realm, it's just a matter of moving your hands if you want to drag me out of the Eight Elements realm. You're exaggerating, Lu Li muttered. Before Yun Nuoshing could think of something to say, she quickly took something out of nowhere and put it on the table. By the way, this is for you. Yun Nuoshing lowered his head and glanced at it. He was a little surprised. However, when he thought about how she had personally forged a divine weapon for him, he wasn't particularly surprised. It was a sword hilt. The black sword hilt was engraved with golden patterns. That was all. However, if one looked closely, they would find that there was a faint black mist surging around the place where the sword had disappeared. It was faintly mixed with the space around it. It only reduced one's visibility a little, but it didn't condense into a ball of mist. The Dark Abyss sword was ranked third in the Divine Sword record. It was a super divine weapon made of pure dark elemental energy. Moreover, it was the only one he knew so far. It was a divine weapon of great success. It didn't take much effort to deal with the heavenly god of origin. He said the same thing back then. He thought that he had a great advantage when he had 4 divine weapons of great success. Then, he was defeated. Logically speaking, he was just a small little demigod. There was a gap between him and a heavenly god. His body couldn't make up for it. Moreover, he was worried that with his current strength, if he unleashed 4 or even 8 times the power of the Dark Abyss sword, he would collapse first. He wasn't so weak that he couldn't control the power of his divine weapon. Unless he was exhausted, he wouldn't suffer a backlash. However, he was worried that if he unleashed that power, it would cause a series of riots that would kill him. Azurite pushed the Dark Abyss sword forward and nodded at him. The Dark Abyss sword. Brother Yu, you shouldn't be surprised. I found it in a place outside the realm of the gods. It will be of great help to you. Moreover, I'm not used to using these things. I've temporarily sealed it to Tier 9, so that you won't be swallowed by the phenomenon caused by the energy riot. But for now, Tier 9 should be enough. Moreover, you don't lack it. Of course, he wasn't surprised. He was even struck by the sword back then. Actually, I think it might be better for you to keep it. The power of the heavenly god of origin should be able to unleash 90% or even 100% of the Dark Abyss sword's power. Azurite smiled and shook her head. I'll pass. It's easier for me to use my own weapon. Yun Nuoshing hesitated for a moment but didn't refuse. He had been collecting divine swords since a long time ago, and now was no exception. By the way, in the Blood Demon Valley of the Kuan Yuan region, the 5th demonic blood sword is there, and the 9th Shadowlight sword seems to be inside the sun. Azurite looked at him with a little surprise and nodded. All right, I'll find time to get it for you. If I've already gotten it, I'll let you know. If you're doing something, just let me know. There's no need to waste time going to a place. Time is of the essence. Yun Nuoshing thought for a moment and said seriously, I think I'll be killed by them. That's why I haven't dared to go." Azurite was speechless. Holding the dark abyss sword in his hand, Yun Nuashing looked at the low-light zone, and shook the sword's hilt. He nodded and took the dark abyss sword into his body with his divine body's origin. There was also a black pattern in his soul, which happened to be connected to the mark of the dark abyss sword. He had long been able to control his origin to absorb or not. The state where he didn't reject anything back then was purely caused by his origin not being able to control it well. Then that's it for now. I have to go to the little divine land. Well, I promise you that I won't disappear for no reason. But I can't disappear in this life either, so… Yun Nuashing was halfway through his words when Azurite waved her hand and interrupted him. "Do you have any plans?" Yun Nuashing showed a mysterious smile. "Do you still remember that day when the red lotus hellfire burned the world? You asked me what I did." Azurite thought for a moment and remembered. "You said you left a gift for the realm of the gods. Are you referring to that? Let's look forward to it. It's something good. It's a foundation that I left behind, one of the few." Azurite thought about it and felt that she couldn't agree with what he said. They risked their lives to create a bunch of suns and an entire world of divine armament. In the end, he said that he didn't leave behind much. "The treasures that I left behind still need to be opened. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste?" Yun Nuashing laughed and turned to walk out of the pavilion. Just as he took 2 steps, he was hugged from behind. He stopped and shook his head helplessly. He turned around and hugged the girl. Azurite whispered, "Be careful. I've been watching you." "Don't worry." A cloud of mist came in front of his eyes. The feeling of moving backward was born in his mind. A few seconds later, the white mist in front of him quietly burst like a bubble. The chaotic space around him also quickly disappeared. After another blink of an eye, Yun Nuashing walked out of the myriad dragon mountains and returned to the ghostly forest. Xian and the others who were wandering around in the forest out of boredom saw Yun Nuashing come out. They quickly went up to him and looked at him. Before they could say anything, they were stunned. They seemed to feel that there was a slight change in him. He seems to be a little more haggard. He seems to have become a little crazy. Shoo. Let's observe him first. Xian and the others looked at each other and instantly communicated with their eyes. Then, Xian smiled and said, "How was it? Did you see him?" Yun Nuashing nodded and sighed. "I saw him. I got a lot of information after walking around. Let's not talk about that first. Time is of the essence. Let's go back to the 9 gods' shrine first and then go to Little Divine Land." Xian and the others looked at each other. Although they did not know what happened in just half a day, they thought that it was an important matter. They did not ask much. They would know when the time came. Yun Nuashing nodded. He waved his hand and directly teleported back to the 9 gods' shrine. Yun Nuashing and the others had just teleported back to the hall of the Fire God Temple. Their vision had just stabilized, and they had just stood still and looked at the surrounding situation. They could not help but be stunned. The hall was full of corpses, and Yuan Shi and Mo Yen were almost hanging on the crystal chandelier on the ceiling. The few girls, led by Chu Yingzhan, were also lying everywhere without any reservation. It looked like they had walked into a mass grave instead of a temple hall. Yun Nuashing rubbed his eyes and confirmed that he was indeed standing in the hall of the Fire God Shrine. He then put his hands on his waist and shouted, "Get up! We're in a hurry! Let's go! We're going to Little Divine Land to cause trouble." Then, a group of people climbed up from all directions of the hall with an earth-shattering momentum. After a series of clattering sounds, they left the hall in a mess and hurriedly fled for their lives. As soon as everyone left, the guards rushed into the hall. They were at a loss when they saw the crystal chandelier swinging in the air like a swing, the sofa that had been torn apart, and the coffee table and chairs that were almost overturned. "Didn't I just feel the breath of the young master? Why is it gone? Is there a beast in the hall?" "Shoo, don't talk. Hurry up and clean up. You didn't feel anything. The group of culprits who messed up the hall were now at the border between the northern wilderness and Little Divine Land. In front of them was a huge and exaggerated barrier. The black energy was like a surging flame that was constantly fluttering from the bottom to the top. Looking inside, it was a chaotic and disorderly scene. They couldn't see anything. When they carefully sensed this huge bowl barrier that covered a large area, they couldn't even feel its existence. Even the surrounding space couldn't be sensed. They seemed to be standing in front of a huge black hole, and everything seemed to have disappeared. The dark elemental barrier. It's been a long time. The scene of me controlling it here is still vivid in my mind. After that, I haven't been inside much. However, I heard from others that the vitality has been restored inside, and the rules of the ancient era have been preserved. It's really incredible. The dark elemental energy should be able to dig a hole in the rules there. I didn't expect it to protect the inside instead. Yun Nuashing couldn't help but sigh. He was the only one who was in the group. The others were sighing. They had originally planned to enter when they were demigods, but it had been delayed until now. Wow, this is the Little Divine Lands barrier that you guys were talking about. It's so spectacular. Was a girl who was curious about everything in the realm of the gods, especially these world-class scenery. Although the demon realm also had its own scenery, to her, the sky over there was dark and gloomy red. Just this point alone made her feel bored. Even looking at anything would make her feel bored. Xian looked at it for a while. Thinking of Yun Nuashing's desperate state, she quickly asked, "How do we open this? A little star?" Yun Nuashing frowned at this moment. He crossed his arms and looked at the huge black barrier. Something's wrong. He waved his hand and a circular projection appeared in front of him. It was the scene of the celestial realm using the observer's eye. The projection happened to be looking down from the top of the sky. He kept enlarging the projection and finally locked on to the black spot in the center of the celestial realm. After a while, he could clearly see that there was a strange puncture wound at the top of the black barrier in the projection. The golden color was particularly obvious against the black background, as if something had fallen from the sky and penetrated the barrier. The barrier is broken? F***CK, is this serious? Nightmare was so excited that his hair stood on end. The barrier exploded. The dark element inside can't be. Don't get too excited. Yun Nuashing shook his head. The dark element back then had turned into a barrier that isolated this place for a long time. There won't be any leakage. Frankly speaking, the dark element barrier now is only to preserve the independence of the Little Divine Land and the ancient laws inside. This is an accident. I didn't think too much about it back then. As for this scar, he pinched his bangs. This is an injury caused by the power of time. Let's take a look first. I wonder if the will that was left on the barrier is still there. Yun Nuashing waved his hand and took a step forward. He stretched out his hand and touched the barrier. It was cold to the touch and was as hard as steel. At the same time, a chaotic energy was born from the space, but it did not affect the barrier at all. Black energy condensed in front of everyone's eyes, and it did not take long before it condensed into a solid figure. However, it was like a mist that would dissipate at any moment. Everyone was familiar with the figure, but it also felt a little strange. They knew this figure. The original body was right in front of them, but the original body had changed so much that even he himself could not recognize it. As for the last time they saw a similar appearance, it was at the peak of the god realm, when he had recovered his celestial god body. The figure in front of them was also wearing a demonic godlike armor. It could be considered light armor, and it did not appear to be heavy. The figure appeared, and the cloak behind him swayed. The pair of deep black eyes immediately saw Yun Nuashing. Even if he could not recognize himself, the connection between him and the figure was like a brain and an arm. How could he not recognize him? The figure nodded slightly, and his emotionless and cold voice slowly sounded. The barrier's consciousness reports to you. The barrier of the small divine land is still intact. In the time unable to be verified, it has vaguely locked onto the big origin realm for the past half a month. In the past half a month, it has been hit by a time attack. The aura of the attack has been determined to be of the same origin. The barrier did not counterattack. Yuanshi could not help but scratch his head. What does it mean to determine the aura of the attack as of the same origin? Yun Nuoxing glanced at him and said calmly, "In other words, I was the one who launched the attack. Because it sensed the same aura, it did not put up any defense. Unfortunately, the power of time had a strong destructive power, so it tore a hole in the sky." Everyone was stunned. In the past half a month they did not come here, did they? Yun Nuoxing immediately thought of something. "Oh, I have a guess. Half a month ago, when I was still subduing the divine flame, I noticed that something was wrong. Something was disturbing the energy loop in my Feng Ers and little purple souls, causing us to wake up 600 years later. Ahem, did you see what the thing that attacked us was?" The eyes of the barrier's consciousness flashed with brilliance. It nodded. "It's confirmed. The attack came from the Sword of Time." As soon as it said that, other than Yun Nuoxing who had expected it, everyone else was shocked. Chapter 11:20. The Time Sand Sword was ranked 4th in the Divine Sword record. Yun Nuoxing had already obtained it when he was in Xiaoguang City. However, due to his lack of skill and knowledge, he could not repair it. In the small world of the elemental stone, he saw the time crack, so he thought of a plan and threw the Time Sand Sword into the Sea of Time to let it repair itself. He only left behind the original imprint of the divine body of spiritual reception. Unless he died, no one could get it. That imprint was for the convenience of retrieving it in the future. Only the heavens knew how long it would take to repair the sand sword in the Sea of Time. Only the heavens knew if it had fully recovered. If it even had a soul, there was no way for him to retrieve it. He could only squat at the side and cry. But now that he saw the Time Sand Sword piercing through the barrier of the small divine land, he was relieved. At least the aura on the Time Sand Sword was determined to be of the same origin, so the latter did not resist. Speaking of which, if these two really collided, the entire divine land would be finished. The Time Sand Sword is made from the endless power of time and the power of the natural order. It has probably recovered to its peak state, so when it broke through space and fell from the Sea of Time, it affected the things with similar auras. Yes, at that time I was subduing the divine flame, so I was in a special time loop. But the power of the Time Sand Sword was of a higher level than the closed time loop I made, so it affected us inside, even though that was not its intention. So at that time our energy loop was affected, and we woke up 600 years later. The Time Sand Sword also pierced a hole in the barrier of the small divine land. Yun Nuoxing tried to explain as simply as possible. After thinking for a while, she said simply, "To put it simply, the power of the Time Sand Sword has a higher priority in the attribute of time. Its level on the world stairway is higher than mine, so it affected me. If it was the other way around, my level on the world stairway is higher than its level, then it could not affect me, but I would still fall into the small divine land." After listening for 5 seconds, everyone understood. Then, they let out a long "oh." Moreover, they were very rational and did not ask what the stairway of the world was. If they had to explain something that they did not understand, it would take hundreds or thousands of words. That time scar is a fixed scar. It won't expand or shrink. It's fixed there, and it's very simple to deal with. I'll leave it to you. Yun Nuoxing said to the stronghold's consciousness, "Now, open the door first. While you're at it, throw some things related to the Sword of Time into our minds. Oh, be gentle with them. They can't take it." The barrier's consciousness suddenly made a rather human-like gesture. It tilted its head and nodded in realization. At the same time, they processed a lot of information in their minds, all of which were related to the small divine land and the time sand sword. Other than that, there was another very important thing. Although they felt dizzy with their eyes closed, they could feel that something in their bodies had been activated, and it was an explosive activation. The feeling was like being unable to speak for 100,000 years and finally roaring out a word. Just by hearing their own roars, they felt like they were going to ascend to immortality. That was the sudden activation of the star fate, which was also the main reason why their minds were in a mess. Previously, they had imagined countless scenarios, such as ascending to immortality in broad daylight and being struck by lightning for 3 days and 3 nights before being enlightened. However, they did not expect that they would be so dizzy that they could not find themselves. Boss. Ugh, the star fate has been activated. Ugh. I'm so King dizzy. Nightmare's handsome face was pale. Every time he spoke, he retched and tears flowed down his face. Yuan-shi propped himself up and struggled for a while before lying down again. How do you feel? My voice has become a little clearer. Is your voice better? Yuan-shi was speechless. No, it seems to have become my voice when I was 17 or 18 years old. Listen, it doesn't sound as manly as usual. If you say that out loud, the boss will beat you to death. Everyone nodded in understanding. There were 4 men in the team, and one of them was a girl from the beginning to the end. If there was someone who did not sound manly, it would be him. Even the crazy girl Chu Yingzhan was more manly than him. Ming lay face down on the ground, the wings on his back flapping. Where's my brother? I don't know. I feel like the whole Deyuan world is spinning. I don't have time to see where the boss is. Bro, answer me. Your sister is calling you. Did you throw her out? After waiting for a few minutes, everyone slowly opened their eyes. A faint light began to gather in front of their eyes. Their shaking vision was trying to focus, but they could finally see what their surroundings looked like. The sky was dark and gloomy. If that was the sky, everyone thought that it was the void. They had dealt with the void many times, so they could quickly recognize the appearance of the void. Moreover, the scene of faint purple and black blending in the distance confirmed their thoughts. Although they were in the void, it was not completely dark. A bright light came from nowhere, allowing them to see the situation around them clearly. The bright light made them feel like there might be an invisible sun. The place where they landed was beside a 10-meter-wide river. The river was not turbulent, which could be seen from a large floating object hanging on the river. Chu Chun had been floating there for almost 10 minutes and had not been washed away. The riverside was an open space that was not very wide. There were some messy footprints among the fine green grass. It could be seen that they were from the same small creature. The footprints were only 2 fingers wide, but it was obvious that it was very powerful. There was only one type of footprints beside the water source, which should be occupied by some powerful demon beast. Since they had fallen here, they might have been discovered by it. Looking into the distance, they could only see a dense forest. Through the gaps in the forest, they could see the situation faintly. They seemed to be on a higher ground. Looking into the distance, they could only see the void. There was also a faint light coming from below. Xian calmed himself down and slowly stood up. He called out in his soul, "Little star, where are you?" There was no response from the soul, which made everyone's hearts turn cold. In this unfamiliar place, no matter how out of the norm that guy was, he would have to move around to be able to use it. With his thin and frail demigod body, he would be done for if he touched anything. Just as everyone's heart sank, a shrill voice came from the soul. I'm here. I'm fine. You guys wait. That shrill voice was like the voice of a little girl who had yet to go through puberty. Everyone was stunned when they heard it, but he had already cut off the connection in time, so no one could investigate further. They were all confused. Chu Chun climbed out of the water. He shook off the water on his body and looked up. He could not help but point at Yuan-shi and Nightmare. Hey, you two have become younger. Everyone turned to look at Yuan Shi and Mo Yen when they heard this. They saw that Yuan Shi and Mo Yen had changed from looking like they were in their 20s to looking like they were 18 years old. They didn't find it strange when they thought about the rejuvenation that they had mentioned earlier. Yuan Shi looked at the river and had a strange expression. That's not right. I'm still young. How can I be rejuvenated? Nightmare said casually. Maybe the stars felt that your soul was old and shrunk you. By the way, so did I. But I didn't change. Chu Yingzhan pointed at herself. Feng Er thought for a moment. Maybe they felt that you were young enough. Yuan Shi rolled his eyes at her. That's strange. Look, only the two of us have become younger. If both of us were to become younger, with little star's incredible soul age, wouldn't it be? Yuan Shi was suddenly stunned. Everyone looked at each other in shock. Thinking back to Yun Nuoxing's voice and how he had hurriedly cut off the soul communication, they all felt that some shocking secret had been exposed. Then, the fire of gossip burned in their eyes. They sensed in their souls. As expected, he had cut off the connection and could not find him. Feng Er's nose twitched. Her eyes lit up. She smiled and pointed at the forest. This way, follow me. Before she could finish her sentence, little Bing had already run out with a whoosh. The soul link between the two of them could not be concealed. The group of people had sinister smiles on their faces. They tiptoed and followed Bing and Feng into the forest. After walking for only 2 minutes, the two girls stopped. They climbed behind a tree and peeked inside. Seeing this, the others could not wait to squeeze in and take a look inside. They saw that in an empty space between a few trees, there was a huge tree root that protruded 2 to 3 meters out of the ground. At this time, sitting on the tree root was a little unfamiliar lowly. Her skin was as white as translucent ice crystals. She had dazzling eyes and 2 diamond-shaped pupils. Her face was really delicate and cute. The most conspicuous thing was the long, colorful hair that was almost tied up behind the little girl's back. The hair was held in her hands and kept fiddling with it. It was really tied up. There were also pieces of grass and wood tangled in the hair, as if she had dragged it from the grass for a distance. That ridiculously thick, colorful hair and that starry robe had buried half of her body. Everyone looked at each other in horror. The guess in their hearts was confirmed. After this guy came back, he went into the small divine land with the star fate. In the end, he turned into an 11 or 12-year-old lowly. They felt that their worldview was about to collapse. Damn it! What terrible thing did this hair go through to be tied up like this? Yun Nuoxing sat on the tree root. His face was covered in sweat as he fiddled with the long, colorful hair that was tied up into a spiral. The more he could not untie it, the more agitated he became. The more agitated he was, the more he could not untie it. He was so agitated that he did not notice that someone was peeping behind him. He even forgot to take care of his current body. Xian also looked at him anxiously. After staring at him for 2 minutes, he finally could not help but fly to his side and press his head. You can't untie it like this, wah! Yun Nuoxing did not notice that there was someone behind him. He was so scared that his soul almost flew out of his body. He shot forward and turned around to glare at Xian angrily. Why didn't you make any sound when you walked? No. How did you find me? What? Don't look. Don't look. I don't want to live anymore. Everyone listened and broke out in cold sweat. This guy's persona was collapsing. Xian walked over and hugged him without saying anything. He pressed his head with one hand and said softly, "Shut up, sit still and don't move." The small Yun Nuoxing trembled all over as he recalled the fear of being dominated by them. His small body curled up as he trembled. Everyone who saw this did not know whether to laugh or cry. Indeed, there was always one thing to conquer another. After this fellow became small, he was directly suppressed. This is the buffer zone, the last checkpoint before entering the small China. It's to prevent too many people from rushing into the small China and causing the space here to become unstable. It's also used to prevent people with dangerous objects from entering the small China, so as to prevent the barrier from disintegrating from the inside. As you all know, once someone starts looking for trouble, there's no way to stop them. This buffer zone is designed to forcibly prevent people from entering the small China. It's either to kill them or not to let them in. This is a piece of land that I casually plucked over and turned into a floating island. There's still a huge amount of energy and life energy remaining on it. I just learned that something incredible has been nurtured here. Of course, it's only for ordinary people. It might even be a paradise now. The barrier's consciousness has divided the buffer zone into several regions and randomly tossed people all over the world. Under normal circumstances, it won't show itself. The central region is the place with the highest energy concentration, which is where we're at right now. There's probably a lot of natural treasures there, but well, they're not of any use to us. The small Yun Nuoxing explained the situation in this space in a brisk and childish voice. Xian and Feng were behind him, playing with his long, curly hair. Yuan Shi looked at this big lowly, awkwardly. His cheeks twitched. Then how do we get to the small China? Why don't you look at the information the barrier's consciousness gave you? Chu Yingzhan said in annoyance. I just looked through everything. We just need to go to the other side of the buffer zone. It's not that far for us. If Dumbo takes us there, we'll be there in one teleport. We'll be in the real small China after we get there. Yun Nuoxing nodded. If you're interested, you can take a look at the buffer zone. Especially the celestial luck in your bodies. It's already starting to take effect. Nightmare scratched his head. Other than becoming younger and more energetic, I can't detect any other changes. Well, don't worry. It's all subtle. Yun Nuoxing stood up and looked into the distance. I'd like to rush in directly. Sit down. Don't move. Wait for me to finish before we rush in. Xian pushed him down and stared at the pretty Mei Mao. Yun Nuoxing shivered and shrunk his body even smaller. He mumbled so much that no one knew what to say. After all the preparations were done, Yun Nuoxing was almost done with the girls. Everyone stood up and prepared to jump off the cliff. Yun Nuoxing waved his hand. Then let's fly over slowly. Fly over. Bing suddenly lifted him up excitedly and hugged him in her arms. She took the lead and rushed out, leaving behind a silly laugh. Hee, the daddy of the small one. What? You stupid dragon! Put me down! Put me down! I'm not a doll. I'm with you. You can't be so rude just because I've become smaller. I'm your father, not your son. I'm a very mature soul in front of you. Help! I'm going to die. I'm too ashamed to face anyone. Everyone was speechless. This guy had completely let himself go. Clouds of black fog wandered in the desolate wilderness. A faint mist filled the sky and earth. It was the wandering dark elemental energy, but it had already lost its power and became a decoration. At most, it dimmed the sky and earth slightly, but it couldn't obstruct the view of the ground. However, all that could be seen was the desolate land and jagged rock. The ground was full of man-made cracks, which should have been there during a battle. Occasionally, there would be black waves in the sky, as if something was disturbing the void and the dark elemental energy. It was as if a giant beast was lurking in the void. The small divine land was ultimately cut off from the god realm. There was a void between the two. The explosion of dark elemental energy back then didn't completely destroy this place, but it caused another kind of terrible destruction. Even if one went from the buffer zone to the small divine land, one could still see the edge of the void. It's a bit desolate. There aren't many people. Yuan Shi kept looking around. The buffer zone wasn't very big. It was only the size of a large city. It's probably because there aren't many people coming in at this time. The small divine land isn't a place you can enter as you wish. The isolation between this place and the outside world is very serious. Sometimes it takes 1,000 years for news to spread in the God realm, Nightmare said. But there's another big news breaking into the small divine land. Qin Yen glanced at Yun Nuoxing. She had pretty much sorted out the information. She already knew a lot of things before she even went in. Yun Nuoxing looked at Xian and the others with a wronged expression. He wanted them to help him save him from Bing Er's arms, but they only looked at him with interest. Their eagerness to try made him despair. He didn't know what kind of strange talent this stupid dragon had triggered when he was about to give up on being saved. He glanced at the 2 balls at the back of his head and let out a long sigh. Then, he looked down at the ground below. I just said that there's a lot of life here, and it's already so desolate. This place has been desolate for many years. It seems that no matter how big the buffer zone is, it's not enough to sustain permanent living conditions. After all, it's missing the heart of the world. From the moment it was dug out and thrown into the void, it was no longer under the control of the heart of the world. Moreover, it's still floating in the void. But it's already beyond my expectations that it could last until now. Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the lifeless scene in front of him. There are many traces of battle. There are also bones buried here, Qin Yen said softly. It's probably because there was some kind of treasure here when it was green. It was snatched by the people who came in with us, Yuan, she said casually. Let's hurry up a little. Yun Nuoxing wrinkled his nose. With my talent for being a troublemaker, I'm afraid there's some kind of problem again. Everyone agreed. After all, they would never run out of trouble if they followed him. Chapter 11:21. The void fog was a kind of thing that could destroy both laws and causality. It was known as the abyssal death fog during the Dark Age. In this era, Navira, the first god to discover it, named it the void fog. So far, no one knew what it was. There was no energy fluctuation, no similar attributes related to life, will, and not even a strand of thought. It might be a phenomenon, but the void fog was man-made. It was thrown out by the legendary neighbors of the realm of the gods, and was currently causing chaos in the 3 planes of the 8 elemental realms. Currently, it was known that the methods of destruction included but were not limited to the collapse of the timeline, directly making the concept of space disappear, and throwing out a lot of ugly creatures that might be the failed synthesis of the creator to cause physical and psychological damage to the enemy. It would destroy the enemy's thoughts and spread itself to any corner of the world like a plague, and then devour the world clean. It was simple, convenient, and fast. It had a habit of appearing suddenly, sneaking out behind you when you were ready for the front line, and causing damage to your anus that was equivalent to splitting heaven and earth, making you angry and sorrowful. So when Yun Nuoxing suddenly came across a piece of filthy land in the buffer zone, he showed great calmness and raised his middle finger to launch a regional taunt. What the F***ck? His friends, on the other hand, began to curse in his soul without restraint. Their exclamations overlapped, and his head was buzzing like tens of thousands of ducks barking at each other across a river. At this moment, Yun Nuoxing reckoned that even a dragon would be drowned by the duck's merciless quacking, crawling on the ground in agony. As for whether the dragon would be in agony, Yun Nuoxing was not sure. Anyway, he was already on the verge of a mental breakdown. The buffer zone was about the central region. The place where they were thrown down was at the center of the entire buffer zone. It would not take too long to reach the real small divine land from here. Even if they flew slowly and strolled around, it would take less than 3 to 4 hours. After knowing that it was not a long distance, everyone showed their due curiosity about this special zone and flew slowly with the mentality of a sightseeing tour, until they bumped into a piece of dark land. At this moment, everyone completely understood how serious the estrangement between small divine land and the outside world was. Even if the people inside did not recognize this dark thing, they probably knew how destructive it was. The ground was full of scars, and there were broken limbs everywhere. It was obvious that a fierce battle had taken place here. The ground below was so black that it was smoking. A large group of strange black creatures that were more brutal than wild beasts and had no sense of reason wandered in the wilderness. Everywhere they went, the ground was covered in black, and it was still spreading. Everywhere they went, there was a disgusting smell. The tide of darkness, the army of darkness, they had faced it head-on once in Mount Fengyan. At this moment, everyone was no stranger to the crawling, lying, and squirming things on the ground. It was just that they were disgusting and nauseating. The air was filled with a disgusting and extremely disgusting smell. Just thinking about it made them feel a wave of heat rush up from their abdomens to their throat. They almost vomited out last year's dinner. However, this news did not spread back to the realm of the god. No one in the outside world knew that there were such ominous things here. The teleportation zone has probably been lost a long time ago. The probability of the void fog seeping into small divine land is as high as 90%. Yun Nuoxing rubbed her bangs and whispered in a childish voice, "A large amount of energy in the buffer zone has been seized here. It doesn't seem like it was done by someone. Based on what I know about the nature of the void fog, it's most likely that they're devouring that energy. That's why the other places appear so desolate." "Your shadow didn't tell you about this?" Yuan Shi was very surprised. "Isn't it in charge of the stronghold in small divine land? Why didn't it tell you about such a big thing that happened here?" Yun Nuoxing shook her head. "It wouldn't know about this. It only manages the stronghold itself. Occasionally, it would take a look at what's happening in small divine land. It can't see the buffer zone, and since it didn't tell me about this, then the damage caused by the void fog in small divine land might not be too serious. Maybe it's only spread to places like the border of small divine land? Perhaps only the people who passed through the buffer zone and lived at the border of the small divine land knew about this. Perhaps it also alarmed others. However, since they couldn't see any threat or benefit from it, there weren't too many powerful people who cared about it," Ziyan said. Yuan Shi's cheeks trembled. "After all, those who go to small divine land are all demigods and low-level god. If one or two of them die, it won't even cause a ripple. Even if a large number of them die, no high-level gods will care. This is a fatal illness." Nightmare shook his head. He thought of something and looked at Yun Nuoxing. "Boss, could there be god-level life forms in small divine land?" Yun Nuoxing nodded. "Yes. Theoretically, there should be. The power of the natural order in small divine land is from the ancient age. But there shouldn't be any heavenly gods. Probably. It's hard to say. I don't know how anyone could ascend to become a heavenly god when the natural order has withered to such a degree. In my opinion, if that heavenly god from the 133rd era really ascended to become a heavenly god in this era, it would be a miracle, an amazing miracle. So amazing! Chu Yingzhan could not help but say. I was just observing the natural order of the natural order. Wasn't I patrolling the low ripples in the divine realm some time ago? Through the records of the Pillar of Creation and my own senses, I was able to obtain a ripple of the law concept layer. The real situation is only 1 in a billion different from what I recorded, so it's negligible. My conclusion is that after 130 eras, the law of decay has reached an unprecedented level, and it's still getting worse even now. I'm talking about the law suppression of the Deyuan realm, and even the divine realm is getting worse. No matter how independent the divine realm is, it's impossible to be independent of the Deyuan realm. To become a god, you need to brand your god's mark in the law level of this world. To be more specific, it's in the law concept layer. This brand will not be stopped by anything, and will definitely come into contact with the law concept layer of the divine realm. However, after 130 eras, this step is almost impossible to succeed, Not to mention that the gods need to come into contact with the primordial realm itself, and there's also a noisy-to-death void declaration to be issued. Xian. In other words, after 130 eras, it is impossible for any heavenly gods to be born again, let alone a new heavenly god. More or less, but we can't rule out the existence of extreme examples. For example, I have my own special way to ascend to the later stages of the divine realm. In 1 or 2 lifetimes, I also helped Sister Shui. I should be in that position anyway, so it's still possible for me to run back, and it's also within the permissible range to help someone along the way. After all, no matter how much I run, I'm still running in the same place. Yuan Shi frowned. Then do you think it's possible that the one in the 133rd era is actually an old monster from a few eras ago? It's also reincarnated, so it also has a special way to ascend to the heavenly god level? It's also possible. It's not my privilege to go through the reincarnation road, so it's normal for others to do it. Everyone glanced at him and could not help but think, so far, you seem to be the one who died the most happily, treating the reincarnation road like your backyard. Ahem, stop. If you're really interested in this, we can talk about it slowly when the astrological signs are good. Yun Nuoxing coughed softly and finally brought the topic back. Now let's look at the things in front of us. Ugh. I was just about to avoid this topic, and you brought it back. Chu Yingzhan smiled bitterly. The things on the ground were too disgusting, and they really did not want to look at them anymore. Yuan Shi and the others quickly took out their weapons from their pants and gestured at the air. I feel my body become lighter. Is it an illusion? Boss, where do we fight? How do we fight? Nightmare asked casually. Everyone turned to look at Yun Nuoxing, waiting for his instructions. However, when they turned their heads, they saw a purple-black door. Well, now that his body was getting smaller and smaller, the 2-meter-long netherworld sword was as wide as a door. In the past, he could hold the sword with one hand, but now, both hands were trembling. Feng'er could not help but laugh. His current state was really too cute. Fortunately, the netherworld sword could change. Yun Nuoxing shrunk the netherworld sword to half its original size in a short while. It did not look as majestic, but at least it was not uncomfortable to hold. He glanced at Feng'er and wanted to reach out and pinch her face. Unfortunately, he could not help but sigh when he thought of how Bing-Er hugged him like a doll. Fight. Don't worry about anything. Go all out and kill until you reach the teleportation zone. You don't plan to kill everyone alone? Chu Yingzhan did not forget to ask when she was warming up. Yun Nuoxing glanced at her and said faintly, "We will have to deal with these things in the future, so I'm letting you guys familiarize yourselves with them in advance. Now let's fight." Hurrah! Nightmare roared, and like a cannonball, he shot towards the black clouds on the ground at a speed many times faster than the speed of sound. A violent explosion was accompanied by a large ball of dazzling light. A huge energy crater was imprinted on the ground, and the tens of thousands of dark soldiers on the ground disappeared without a trace. Then, in the blink of an eye, they were drowned by even more waves. Don't go too fast. Be careful not to fall to your death. Yuan Shi also shouted as he dove down with a gust of wind. Behind him were Chu Chen, Xian, and the others, as well as Yun Nuoxing, who was being hugged by Bing-Er with one hand. The latter was still waving her little arms and legs in vain, and she looked like she was about to die. Roar! The dark army that was wandering aimlessly in the wilderness came to life at this moment. They focused all their attention on the few craters on the ground. The rich breath of life made them go crazy. Countless hisses converged into an earth-shattering roar that reverberated in the wilderness. Then, in the next moment, the clearly visible darkness on the ground surged towards Yun Nuoxing and the others like a tidal wave. Once again, they were drowned in the endless black tide. The monsters pounced on them from every angle. There were strange, inhuman creatures everywhere. Even the humanoid black fog had 30 heads and 60 arms. Any one of them could stop a child from crying at night. They were like the grotesque creatures born from the deepest nightmares in the world. Even those with strong minds could not help but fall into a trance when they fell into the sea of black fog. It was as if they were in a dream, having an endless nightmare. If they did not want to be swallowed by the nightmare, they could only keep waving the sharp blades in their hands. When Yuan Shi and Nightmare, who were at the forefront, tore a hole in the dark tide, the whole world seemed to be boiling. The black monsters that covered the sky and the earth roared in a demonic voice that made people tremble in fear. They charged again and again without fear of death. They were not alive, so they could not feel pain. Even death could not stop them. Boom! Boom! Bursts of energy that caused the earth to tremble blasted the countless black fog limbs into the air, tearing them into shreds and vanishing without a trace. Even further away, gigantic dark monsters appeared out of thin air. They seemed to be born from the light, endless and endless. When Yuan Shi and Nightmare led the charge and led the team for thousands of miles, everyone could clearly feel an invisible pressure coming from all directions. Those strange monsters were not all trash that could be easily torn apart. Just as Yun Nuoshing and that old ghost said, after the cannon fodder, there would be higher-level cannon fodder. However, they did not feel it in the void crack in Mount Fengyan. There were only low-level cannon fodder there. This made his heart sink slightly. Perhaps the void fog that had entered the buffer zone was not a small amount that had accidentally slipped in. If the void fog had been condensed into a ball, it would have been enough to keep itself from being destroyed. Then, it would continue to strengthen itself, causing the void fog to expand and spread out. In this process, the dark tide would also continue to grow stronger. It might not have been like this during the Age of Darkness, but it was no longer the Age of Darkness. Who knew what would happen after such a long period of time? And from the looks of it, the dark tide had changed a long time ago. Therefore, Yun Nuoshing did not take that old ghost's information as completely accurate. He was also using his own method to determine the battle strength and changes of the dark tide. Yuan Shi and Xian also knew his plan, so they did not use their full strength when they pushed forward. Yuer even had the strength to play with a large group of monsters in the palm of her hand so that he could see clearly what was special about these monsters. A giant that was thousands of feet tall suddenly rushed into the battlefield, holding a huge pillar that supported the sky and smashing it down. A huge shadow fell from the sky like a curtain of darkness. Yuan Shi and the others were stunned for a moment. They turned their gazes and hurriedly retreated. The black pillar slammed heavily on the ground. Countless rocks and soil flew everywhere. A large number of black monsters were shattered into countless black fog. However, the black fog did not dissipate like the monsters that were destroyed. Instead, it floated to the rear and reformed into a new batch of abnormally disgusting monsters that pounced forward again. Wow! Can they differentiate between friend and foe? The last time I saw it, it wasn't like this. Yuan Shi's figure appeared in midair and paused for a moment. She let out a loud roar and a massive green tornado exploded in midair. Tens of thousands of black monsters were swept into the tornado and torn to shreds by the storm. Last time, the dark tide didn't become stronger. Nightmare shouted and slapped thousands of black monsters away. In the endless army there were already creatures that he could not kill with a single slap. Of the thousands of monsters that were sent flying, only 70 to 80% were smashed into pieces. The rest landed safely on the ground and only staggered a little. However, to the dark monsters, those that were not dead were all at their peak state. A single mindless monster in its peak state was not scary, and they were not afraid of 10 of them. 100 of them could only make them move a little. However, if this number was multiplied by 100, 1,000, or even 100,000 times, it would become an endless army that drowned them both inside and outside. Boss, are you done? If you are, we are going to kill them all. Before Nightmare could finish his sentence, they heard a childish shout, "Squat down!" Everyone trembled. Xian, Yuanxi, and the others quickly slapped the monsters around them away and squatted down or half-knelt down. Bing Air and Little Apple, who came out to help, fell to the ground because of their height. Just as they were about to move, a dazzling dark purple sword light swept across with a blinding light. Wherever it passed, the dark tide disappeared without a trace. The huge giant and its pillar exploded into black clouds that filled the sky. Boom! Boom! The sword light instantly disappeared into the horizon. It was as if a huge cloud had gathered within a radius of 100,000 kilometers and then disappeared without a trace in an instant. It was so empty that only a black wilderness could be seen. Moreover, the darkness on the ground was also gradually dissipating with the disappearance of the Dark Army. Yun Nuoxing saw this and nodded. The dark tide has the ability to pollute the environment. Once they occupy a large enough stronghold, they can use all the energy in the world to transform into an endless dark army. And these are just splits of the void mist. Spots of light gathered around him and formed into a human figure. The human figure picked him up. Yun Nuoxing cried out. For a moment, he forgot what he was thinking about just now. He hurriedly shouted and struggled, "Stupid angel! Stupid! Stupid! Let me down! You can't do this to me! I just became smaller. But I have a very mature soul." Ming held his arms and ignored his words. He said softly, "The purification effect of the holy power is not obvious. The holy flame of the angel can't restrain them. They are monsters without souls, intelligence, or even attribute. How can you restrain them? I still don't know what the void mist is, but they can't restrain anything. It's just that the polluting ability of the Dark Army is a very serious problem. They can replenish their energy from all the energy and objects in the environment. The former is needless to say. As for the latter, it can be as small as a stone or a grain of sand, as big as a person or a mountain. Everything can be turned into a part of them." Yun Nuoxing wanted to cry but had no tears. He gave up struggling and smacked his lip. "This is really tricky. What should we do in the future?" The last sentence was said so softly that Ming did not hear it clearly. "Ah, brother, what did you just say?" Yun Nuoxing shook his head. For the time being, he did not tell them everything about the underworld and the void mist. He was afraid that it would scare them. Now is not the time to relax. A rumbling sound came from the ground, as if there were thousands of giants running on the ground. A black line appeared on the distant horizon, bringing with it an extremely terrifying aura. The aura that came rushing over was many times more ferocious than the previous one. The boss is very good at angering the enemy. Nightmare weighed the weapon in his hand and looked at the big-sized lowly. "Boss, can we use all of our strength?" Yun Nuoxing nodded and waved his hand. "Let's go. I see the teleportation zone. Crush all the enemies in front of us." Boom! Everyone roared in unison. The power of dozens of godly techniques made the void mist tremble. Monstrous flames and explosions of energy surged in all directions. Yun Nuoxing took the opportunity to break free from Ming's embrace and stood at the front of the team. His colorful hair dragged on the ground. Magic arrays and godly weapons appeared one after another. He held the Netherworld Ruin sword in his left hand and pointed the glittering silver spear in his right. The surging energy within a radius of 10,000 miles turned into a sky-covering wave with this point. It turned into a turbulent ocean that rushed forward. Kill! Following Yun Nuoxing's childish roar, the Dark Army also responded with a roar that shook the void mist. The two groups of people collided with monstrous energy at that moment. The entire void mist reverberated with the echoes of the void mist. The void mist was torn apart. This buffer zone was almost torn apart by the clash between the two armies. Although Yun Nuoxing's body had shrunk, he was still a violent maniac. As he waved his spear and the godly weapon floating beside him, the void mist and the void mist collapsed according to the size of the area. No one knew how many times the void mist had collapsed and how many times the time barrier had healed. Chapter 11:22. When countless people collided with others in their lives and released their light, when the light illuminated the entire continent, few people noticed that a corner of the continent was stained with a deep darkness. It was slowly peeling off and swallowing the chaotic continent that was in conflict, but it was happening at the distant border. The land in the center of Little Divine Prefecture was still quite peaceful. The peace here meant that they had not yet been involved with the deep darkness, but Little Divine Prefecture was bustling every day. The terrifying power of the void fog that distorted the rules and broke the timeline was eating away at the deep order of this world, disintegrating the peace of this world bit by bit, twisting it bit by bit. It had already settled down here, gently polluting this peaceful world. It had been here for a long time, entrenched here for a long time without dispersing. The guards at the border had fought countless battles with it, and countless young and conceited people had joined this long battle, hoping to achieve the effect of training themselves and explode at the limit, but they did not expect to die quietly. This place had swallowed countless lives, and it had been so long that it could be written into history, recorded as a short history of the passing of time. This was the border of chaos, the merciless strangling of life, but countless people fought to be the first to come here. If one took a closer look, one could easily summarize the people who came here. Teenagers, young people, very young people who took things too hard at a young age, young people who wanted to die at a young age, and people who daydreamed all day long. There was a medium-sized city at the border of chaos, 100,000 miles away from the dark border. It was a city that was similar to a supply station and a place to stay. Along a line at both ends of the city, one could see many cities that were not too big or small, and they faintly formed a blockade. This was the futile struggle of the mad scholar who sensed the danger of the dark border 1,000 years ago. It was the blockade that was built by the powerful emperor of the underworld, and at the same time, it attracted countless young people who came here with the purpose of training themselves, because this place had the most dangerous battlefield. It was also very famous in Little Divine Prefecture, but it was also the weakest battlefield. The black monsters were very strong, but they stopped at the level of middle-level gods and low-level gods. No one had ever paid attention to this place. In this place where madness and despair were separated by a thin line of sky, only a lonely old man guarded the city gate for 1,000 years, watching the madness continue to spread, and the blockade retreated again and again, constantly lengthening. There is only endless desolation and death here, and the breath of despair will devour all hope of life. Go back quickly, children. You have come to the wrong place to train yourselves. You should not have come here. There is only loneliness and death here, only death and only darkness. In the city, at the very center of the ceiling line, there was an old man at the city gate facing the border of darkness. He looked to be in his 70s or 80s, old and senile. His figure was stooped, and he didn't have much hair left, but he still had a large beard. He stood at the city gate every day, watching as a group of young people left the city gate and headed for the border of darkness. Occasionally, he would say 2 or 3 words of advice to the newcomers, but he would never resist or say more than a few words. He would only silently record how many of the newcomers had left and how many of them had returned. This group of acquaintances was still persevering, but the older students had not seen him for many days. So cruel, so heartless, so sarcastic. The old man guarding the city side, his hands holding the broom up and down on the ground, but there was nothing on the ground that he needed to sweep. Old man, it's getting cold, you should get some rest. There's no place to shelter from the wind and rain in this place. A young man chuckled beside him. The old man slowly raised his turbid eyes and saw the young man with a blue butterfly hairband slowly walking towards him. He took the broom from the young man's hand and swept the ground without saying anything. He still remembered this young man. He was one of the minor leaders of the group of people who escaped from the Dark Border 3 months ago. They were a new group of people who came from the outside world, but unfortunately, it was very difficult for them to return. One of his companions was injured and was still recuperating in the city. At the time, this young man was running around looking for medicine, and the old man happened to run into him, so he casually gave him a hand. Who would have thought that this young man would still be here today? The old man stared at the young man with his turbid eyes and said nothing. After not seeing him for a while, the young man appeared to have become a bit more haggard, more mature and steady. He no longer had the frivolity and hot-bloodedness of the young people who had just arrived, which was actually a good thing. In this damned place, such personalities were unnecessary. Old man, how long do you think it will take for the Dark Border to spread here? The young man suddenly sighed. The old man was silent. He looked at the dark area on the horizon. The breeze blew his long white beard. He murmured in a low voice, endless despair, the darkness will devour everything. In the unknown scenes there are inhuman battles. There is a hole in the depths of the world, and they are taking advantage of it to enter. They are endless, they are already here. The young man was a bit surprised. The old man rarely spoke. This is not a battlefield, this is not a battlefield. This is a place of destruction, a trace of the spreading destruction. This is not their battlefield, this is not your battlefield. The young man frowned and couldn't help but say, but isn't the existence of the sacred fortress to stop the Dark Border from spreading? Those powerful people in the small divine land don't want to care about this small matter, at the edge of the border, but for the people who live here, this is a matter of life and death. Wrong, wrong, one day it will be devoured. This is their war, their battlefield, a battle of the higher up. We should be vigilant, we should be vigilant. No one. The old man's words were unclear, and the young man didn't know what he was thinking or saying. He helplessly shook his head and looked up at the Dark Border in the distance. From this distance, he could barely see the bursts of energy and the eruption of a new battle. He couldn't help but sigh. He and the others hadn't been to that place for a long time. It had been more than 3 months since they rushed out of the Dark Border, and they had been staying in the sacred fortress. They were a bit lost, but not completely dispirited. They came to the small divine land to train themselves, but they didn't expect to encounter such a disaster as soon as they came in. There were even people who died tragically in the Dark Border, and they could only watch as the people who came from the same place turned into a huge black monster that was 100 meters tall. They needed a little bit of time to calm down and reignite their fighting spirit. Lin Xing, you're here in a daze again. Ah, old man, you're still healthy today, but the cold wind from the Dark Border has been a bit strong recently. You should go and rest. Anyway, there's nothing to sweep at the city gate. A figure as strong as a mountain walked out of the city gate with shaking step. He slapped the young man and made him stagger, then bowed to the old man. Lin Xing's body trembled violently, and he couldn't help but roll his eyes. Roshan, you'll dislocate my shoulder sooner or later. Ha, you're exaggerating. Chuan Jingshan laughed and scratched the back of his head. Qing Lian asked me to come find you. Senior Mengyu and Jun Luo Yi said that there might be new movements, and asked us to go and talk. After passing on the message, he sighed heavily. We've been recuperating here for more than 3 months, and everyone has finally come back to their senses. That Dark Border is a nightmare. I can't even control my thoughts just by looking at it. I really don't know why these people like to go there so much. The old man glanced at the big man and said flatly, ignorant people will eventually have to pay the price for their ignorance, but no one asks for anything in return. They will become them, and they will become them, and they will speed up the retreat of the blockade line. Yes, old man, you're saying that again. I have a friend, he's very powerful, and I think he's right about one thing. No one can stop others from seeking death, but once someone wants to seek death, that person has already taken half a step into the cycle of reincarnation. Chuan Jingshan put his hands on his hips and grinned. See, there are people walking into the cycle of reincarnation every day. Reincarnation, the old man murmured, but he did not say anything else. Lin Xing and Chuan Jingshan also looked at the horizon like the old man. There was a scorching sun in the sky, but there was a deep darkness on the horizon. That was the void, and every time they saw that deep darkness, they could not help but think of a certain person, a mysterious person. Thinking of him always cheered them up. The dark, cold wind blew in from the dark border with dozens of spirals, mixed with a trace of energy that had not yet dissipated, rolling up a cloud of dust. Chuan Jingshan could not help but tighten his robe. Lin Xing also shuddered, and he could not help but frown. There shouldn't be a dark wind today, right? In the 3 months they stayed in the sacred fortress, they had seen dark storms blowing from the dark border. Every time the dark whirlwind blew, the climate of the place would change drastically, and it would be a world of ice and snow on a hot summer day, accompanied by violent snowstorms and strange energy phenomena. They had seen it several times. The dark storm blew every 3 days, and every 5 days it would get worse. Even if they were a little used to the abnormal weather here, they could not help but feel that the crazy weather here was really killing them. What a hateful aura, the dark aura. It was as if they saw that day again, when the world was dark and endless nightmare behemoths pounced from all directions. The whistling wind swept away the lives of people from other places, and they were all turned into monsters. Countless ferocious monsters crawled out from the ground and emerged from the air, opening their bloody mouths and pouncing on them. The never-ending battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights, and they were almost buried alive there. The old man looked up into the distance, and he could not help but murmur, "Go back, go back, go back. The peaceful days are long gone, and the sacrifices of life will never be enough. The millennium calamity, the dark calamity, this world will be destroyed. I see it, they are coming, they are coming." Lin Xing and Chuan Jingshan looked at each other and shrugged. They did not understand most of the old man's words anyway, so they did not delve into it. They knew that the old man might not be simple, but they saw him standing at the city gate every day as if he was looking out for something. He was all alone, and he had helped them before. That was why they wanted to take care of the old man. Although the old man did not need their care, he did not chase them away. After standing at the city gate for a long time, a gust of dark and cold wind blew Chuan Jingshan into a sieve. After an earth-shattering sneeze, he quickly put on a coat. Although the wind in the realm of darkness could not be resisted by ordinary clothes, it was a habit for people to wear clothes when they were cold. Regardless of whether it would work or not, he just put it on first. Lin Xing tightened his collar and ran his fingers through his hair. He said to Chuan Jingshan and smiled at the old man guarding the city. "Old man, we'll head back first. We'll probably head towards the center of the small divine continent. We might not be able to visit you for a while. Take care of your health." The old man suddenly nodded. His voice was clear and powerful. "Have a safe journey, child." Lin Xing and Chuan Jingshan were stunned. They had never heard the old man speak so clearly that they could understand. They smiled, cupped their fists at the old man, and walked back into the holy fortress. The old man watched them until they disappeared around the corner of the street. Only then did he turn his head and whisper, "Go, go, leave this place and never come back. This is a land of destruction, not a battlefield for you youngsters." The old man took the broom that was placed beside the wall. His withered but powerful hands held the broom and swept it across the ground, stirring up a faint cloud of dust. Then he returned to his calm appearance. His expression was dull, as if his soul had been extinguished. He stood there withered, as if he had turned into a statue. An abnormal vibration came from the ground. It was as if millions of meteorites were smashing into the ground. The old man looked at the mottled wall. After a long time, he slowly turned around. Then, his weathered and turbid eyes came back to life in 3 seconds. After Lin Xing and Chuan Jingshan left the city gate, they didn't rush back, instead strolling leisurely on the street. The scene inside Sacred Stronghold was still considered peaceful. People from other parts of the small divine continent were gathered here, most of them young, with only 10 or 20 generations in 1,000 years. It was said that at that time, Sacred Stronghold was still a dead blockade, desolate and silent. In just 10 or 20 generations, this place had become somewhat prosperous. It should have been even more prosperous, but it was located in such a place, in the entire small divine continent, a place where even birds wouldn't lay eggs. Furthermore, it was next to a dangerous place, so it wasn't easy for it to develop to this point, and was already at its limit. More than 1,000 years ago, this was also a prosperous scene. This was the first place where the realm of the gods and little divine land came into contact. However, the appearance of the realm of darkness destroyed that. That energy swept across the borderlands. Even high-level gods died in accidents. No one knew the origin of the realm of darkness. It was regarded as a forbidden land and was abandoned for hundreds of years. It was only when the mad scholar, who was the emperor of the underworld, established the Sacred Stronghold blockade that this place gradually recovered its vitality. Lin Xing held the back of his head with both hands. Looking at the stronghold city that was similar to the realm of the gods, he could not help but frown. Death is only 100,000 miles away from here. In 1,000 years, the area of the realm of darkness has expanded by nearly 10,000 times. It has grown from a black dot to such a large area, but no one, Chuan Jingshan curled his lips and said, no one will come to deal with the matters here. Beginner and middle-level gods can't clear this area, and high-level gods don't see much of a threat. They can't find the benefits they want, so they won't come. Since ancient times, countless people have entered the forbidden land of life to search for the benefits that they don't know if they exist. Only this place doesn't interest them, because no one can see anything valuable except death. Isn't the 9 Shrine the guardian force of the realm of the gods? Why don't they come to deal with it? Lin Xing could not help but frown. He did not mean to blame Chuan Jingshan, but a layer of anger ignited in his heart when he thought of the realm of darkness. Chuan Jingshan shrugged. Who do you think is protecting the sacred stronghold? That mad scholar died a long time ago. For the past 1,000 years, the 9 Shrine in Little Divine Land has been protecting and operating the border. Then why don't they just clear the realm of darkness? Wouldn't that be more straightforward? Because the others don't want the realm of darkness to disappear. They see a little bit of value from this dangerous wire that can be squeezed out. They send the younger generation here to gain experience, and the primary gods who come back alive and have experienced hundreds of battles will be focused on training by the forces. This is a primary training ground. The 9 Gods Temple wants to eliminate the realm of darkness, but they are obstructed by the others and can't do anything to them. If they act rashly, they are afraid that they will offend the public. They can't get support from the main camp here, so they can't act at will. If they touch the interests of others, they may be jointly destroyed. So the only thing they can do is to maintain the border. The voice beside them made Lin Xing and Chuan Jingshan turn their heads. They saw a young man with a bright golden body walking slowly with a lazy aura. There was a large group of people behind him. Without exception, they were all affected by his lazy aura and relaxed a little. She opened her small cherry mouth in shock. She was so scared that she could not even speak properly. There. Over there. Look over there. Everyone was stunned for a moment and turned around in confusion. Then, their jaws all dislocated with a crack sound boom. The huge, colorful, brilliant sun suddenly let out a destructive sound that shook the world. A huge energy pillar that was probably hundreds of thousands of miles wide suddenly pierced through the sky, illuminating the world into a dazzling mottled brilliance. It was as if 10 million suns had exploded in the sky, attracting the attention of countless people. They all turned their gazes at the same time, and then screamed and covered their eyes at almost the same time. It was too damn bright, they were about to go blind. The destructive sound was like raging waves beating the shore, one after another. The sound of the waves was endless, as if an endless tide of energy was surging between heaven and earth. At this moment, the entire sealed border of Sacred Stronghold was boiling. Shit. I'm blind. Why did the realm of darkness explode now? Is it a new trick? I don't know. Don't ask me. Lin Xing ignored the screams of Yao Hua and the others. He turned his back to the light and touched his already ruined eyes. He could not help but sigh. It's really bright. He seemed to recall the day a certain someone blew up the stars. That day, he also looked at the explosion of light head-on, in that ball of light that was so bright that it could blind everyone's eyes. There were 3 or 4 rapidly spreading seas of fire. The sacred golden flames, the crimson flames burning with endless vitality, and the dark green crystal-like and crimson flames. The 4 seas of fire swept out for hundreds of thousands of miles, almost burning the realm of darkness. The place where the black clouds covered the sky suddenly became clear and boundless. The younger generation fighting in the realm of darkness had long been scared to death when the energy burst out. At this moment, the flames that filled the sky swept over, and the extreme temperature that could burn the world spread crazily, making them run faster than light as if their butts were on fire. Chapter 11:23. Previously, there were still countless people rushing into the realm of darkness in group. At this moment, when the multicolored sun and the endless flames ignited, those people ran back with 10 times the speed they used to rush into the realm of darkness. Their swift movements seemed to have been tempered thousands of times during the pursuit. Thousands of people turning back at the same time didn't affect their speed at all. Those flames weren't chasing after them, but only spreading over the realm of darkness. After those people were kicked out from the edge of the realm of darkness, the flames suddenly stopped spreading and rapidly spread to both ends, carrying the momentum of a prairie fire. Everywhere it passed, black fog filled the sky. Those dark army roaring and roaring in the sea of flames didn't feel any pain. Their roars and roars mixed together with the sound of the flames exploding. They let out frenzied roars in the sea of flames and ran towards the depths of the realm of darkness. This scene was seen by those who had escaped with their lives. The endless dark army was like the evil creatures of the world of the dead. The flames that could purify the world couldn't stop their advance, but only made them more tyrannical and ferocious. They continued to advance in the flames. Even if they crawled on the ground, as long as they didn't disappear, there was no way to stop them. This was the scene of evil spirits walking in hell. The younger generation that had rushed into the realm of darkness had already retreated to the edge of the sacred fort. Their eyes were filled with bewilderment as they looked at the monstrous flames that almost covered the entire realm of darkness. Their hands and feet were trembling. They felt an irresistible destructive force from those flames. That wall of flames towered into the clouds, like a curtain of flames that isolated the world. The spreading of the fiery line suddenly stopped, and the several seas of fire trembled. Countless dark race soldiers staggered within had already been annihilated, and those that survived were gigantic giants. Terrifying black gas erupted from their bodies, and the black gas that was supposed to dissipate after being destroyed was actually being controlled by them. The black gas that was supposed to dissipate after being destroyed was frantically condensing against the sea of fire. Buzz! Suddenly, a powerful soul and mental attack burst out from the depths of the sea of flames, sweeping across the entire realm of darkness. Wherever that chaotic energy wave passed, the light of the flames would shrink. Boom! Like a gust of wind blowing through the grass, an indescribable impact swept through the entire wilderness like a stormy wave. It even impacted the spirit of everyone in the sacred fortress outside the dark world. Suddenly, a low groan sounded throughout the entire city. From the lowest level to the highest level of gods, all of them were in a trance. Their breathing became sluggish, and they almost fainted on the ground. The black sky-supporting pillar swept across from a distance of 100,000 li, dissipating half of the sea of fire. An astonishingly loud sound erupted from the depths of the realm of darkness. It was as if an entire planet had fallen from the sky and smashed into the ground. The earth quaked and the mountains swayed, causing the earth and rocks of the divine fort to tremble. Countless pieces of sand and soil were thrown tens of thousands of li into the sky. It was as if a huge meteor shower had fallen from the sky, affecting an unknown area. The old man's weathered eyes focused. That black pillar. Although he was in a trance for a moment when the mental attack burst out, he still managed to see something strange and terrifying. That sky-supporting pillar was a huge arm. 2 unfathomably long black pillars pierced through the sea of fire and took shape in the air. 2 enormous palms, which were tens of thousands of miles long, slammed on the ground and created 2 huge palm-shaped pits. Countless oddly shaped limbs emerged around the sky-reaching pillars, waving crazily and struggling to reach up into the sky. It was like a nightmare reborn. "It's coming. It's coming." The old man's voice was indifferent. The owner of the huge arm emerged from the depths of the realm of darkness. It was a giant that only half of its body emerged, crawling on the ground. Like the other monsters of the tide of darkness, it only had a vague shape, but the pressure it released was far stronger than all the other monsters of the dark world. The dark army also became extremely excited because of the appearance of this towering giant. They roared and charged angrily at the enemy like a tide. Just like the name of the tide of darkness, they moved like a surging tide. Wherever they went, there would be turbulent waves. "Kill! Kill all those deformed monsters! Leave that big guy to me!" A young voice that contained boundless murderous intent shook the sky, startling countless people. Many people frowned slightly, wondering who the person who said that was, daring to order them. Just as someone was about to shout angrily, the sea of flames and the black fog suddenly exploded. Figures that were wrapped in powerful energy soared into the sky, bursting out of the realm of darkness. Bursts of energy erupted from their bodies, smashing into the black ground below like a meteor shower, blasting countless dark army into the sky, splitting them into countless parts and disappearing into black fog. Only now did some people realize that the shout just now was not directed at them. They could not help but feel their cheeks heat up. Fortunately, they did not say anything, or else they would have been embarrassed. "La la la la. Get out of my way, you parasitic mutants. Huh." Nightmare shouted a shocking slogan and rushed out of the encirclement. The sword in his hand had a dazzling cold light, and he stabbed thousands of times in an instant, stabbing holes in the ground and the army. Behind him, Yuan Shi, Chu Xianling, Feng Er, and Ming worked together to create a huge flaming tornado of hundreds of thousands of feet, sweeping across the ground and tearing all the black mutants that were comparable to the junior gods into pieces. Beside Xian floated a magic array of 5 colors, and her beautiful face was dyed dreamily by the neon lights formed by the energy around her. Together with her cold smile, the temperature of the surrounding air dropped several times in an instant. She waved her hand casually, and the long sword in her hand fell down casually, as if a group of meteor showers had bombarded the area. The place where the energy exploded was completely wiped out, and not even a ghost was left behind. Yuan Shi and the others could not help but hide a little when they saw this. This guy had become the 3rd destructive maniac after Yun Nuoxing. As for the second one, that was Feng Er, who had worked together with Yun Nuoxing to create a bottomless pit in the godly tiger villa. Until now, no one in the team had such power. Lin Xing, Yao Hua, and the others hurried to the top of the city wall and saw the people drowning in the boundless dark army. They could not help but be stunned, and then their eyes burst with ecstasy. Those guys finally came. They finally came to the little divine land. I was just talking about Little Star, and now they are really here. Jining could not help but smile. Boom! A huge palm tens of thousands of miles long and wide slapped the ground with destructive energy, tearing a 10,000-mile-wide crack in space. Black energy burst out from the ground like a fountain, and groups of dark army appeared out of thin air, blocking in front of Xian and the others. The excited and happy expressions of the people slightly recovered, and a trace of worry appeared in their eyes again. That big guy, they had never seen such a huge black aberration. Yun Nuoxing burst out of the thick black fog, with 6 miniature colorful wings on his back, and his long colorful hair fluttering in the air. He saw the dark army surrounding Xian and the others, and the long spear in his hand suddenly swept in front of him. A destructive energy swept across the surface of the ground, and the whole earth collapsed several meters, and the millions of dark army turned into ashes. Go forward, don't look back. Yun Nuoxing rushed to the front of the crowd with a leap, and with a shout, he turned around and spread his arms. His 6 wings unfurled, and a dozen energy source pearls gradually appeared, spinning rapidly around the starlight's silver spear. Thousands of stars appeared around him, and with a wave of his hand, countless magic arrays appeared in the air. The smallest one was 10,000 feet wide, and the 2 largest ones were 100,000 miles long. They stood on the left and right sides like door gods, and the rumbling energy made the sky change color. Xian and the others waved their hands and smashed out a torrent of energy, shattering the dark army in front of them. Their figures flickered, and they rushed out of the realm of darkness as fast as lightning. Then, they all turned around, and energy madly condensed in their hands. When they saw the huge and boundless giant, their cheeks twitched. This was the biggest monster they had seen so far. I don't care if you are ordinary cannon fodder or fine cannon fodder, disappear from me. The silver spear fiercely waved, and Yun Nuoxing's body flickered with starlight. Countless magic arrays, except for the 2 door gods, flickered together, and hundreds of millions of energy and violent energy burst out. It was as if thousands of stars had exploded, and the void was on the verge of collapse. Rumble! The energy of thousands of magic arrays collided with the palm of the black giant with a rumbling sound, and the energy that seemed to be able to destroy heaven and earth exploded in midair. The remaining energy fell to the ground like arrows, and countless destructive storms swept across. The dark army that was still desperately charging at the rear was swept away by the energy, and not even dregs were left behind. The huge black palm of 10,000 miles long broke through the bombardment of the boundless energy storm, and like a curtain covering the sky, it descended from the sky. That huge palm took in and spat out a terrifying energy that was enough to annihilate the entire region, making the people of Sacred Fort pale. Countless people wanted to turn around and run, but an extremely powerful energy made them unable to move, and even their breathing was weakened. Buzz buzz! Another 2 magic arrays that were 100,000 miles wide broke through the air. 4 huge magic arrays were arranged in 4 corners, and the center was facing the huge palm that was rapidly slapping down, and a frantic buzzing sound came from within. Existence analysis, law decomposition, reversal, caught you. The secondary core of the spear in Yun Nuoxing's hand shone with starlight, and the magic arrays roared and rotated. A destructive power of law rumbled from the magic arrays, and he raised the spear and fiercely stomped on the air. Disappear, ant. The 5th silver-white magic array appeared in the middle of the 4 magic arrays, and the moment it appeared, the thousands of starlight surrounding him instantly dimmed. An energy that could destroy balance and order crazily surged, and a silver-gray energy pillar that was 100,000 miles wide burst out. That huge energy did not have any earth-shattering momentum, and there was no huge energy impact. It silently swept through space, melting away space, time, and law, causing countless people to feel disheartened. The silver-gray energy silently collided with the huge black hand, but there was no surging energy ripple in space, no energy explosion or explosion, only silent annihilation. When the black giant came into contact with the silver-gray energy pillar, his arm actually disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye, just like spring snow meeting the warm sun. Yes, that's it. Don't move, obediently let me decompose it. Yun Nuoxing watched as the giant remained motionless as half of its arm was decomposed by the law decomposition, and could not help but think that this guy was really tough. It did not instantly evaporate after being hit by the law decomposition energy, and was still holding on. If the target was a large city, it would only be a large crater now. This was actually good news for him. As long as it obediently stayed still, it would only take time for the law decomposition energy to kill it bit by bit. However, he was obviously thinking too much. The enemy obviously did not have a brain, but it would not just watch him disappear obediently because of this. When the energy of the disintegration rule wiped off the entire arm of the giant, a strange red light suddenly appeared all over its body. It was like a huge pattern that covered its entire body. Upon closer inspection, the red light was mysteriously protruding, just like the crisscrossing blood vessels in a human body. After the red light appeared, the energy of the disintegration rule could not advance any further. It stretched out its other fist and smashed the silver-gray energy pillar, smashing it into pieces. Yun Nuoxing was stunned when he saw this. As expected of a derivative that contains a large amount of void mist, it is completely different from those cannon fodders of cannon fodders. Sigh, the fluctuation of a deity's law is really troublesome. Yun Nuoxing smacked his lips and slammed his starlight silver spear with his right hand. The tens of millions of magic circles behind him suddenly trembled and split into 4 parts out of thin air. Then, an even larger magic circle of the same size enveloped the 4 magic circles, and its power continued to skyrocket. Just as he was about to go all out, the giant suddenly narrowed its 2 huge eyes, and the 2 balls of light shrank into a slit. A moment later, under the shocked gazes of countless people, the terrifying aura disappeared without a trace, and the huge figure gradually turned into a black cloud and kept retreating. The endless army instantly stopped moving, turned around, and retreated with a loud bang. The giant monsters raised a barrier like a barrier to protect the army as they retreated, guarding against Yun Nuoxing. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. Everyone was stunned. The reversal of the situation was too strange, so strange that Yun Nuoxing did not know what to do in an instant. He could only watch as the frenzied army of darkness retreated into the depths of the realm of darkness. Even the black mottled marks on the ground were rapidly retreating, as if they had given up on a part of their territory and retracted their line of defense. The chaotic battle ended abnormally strangely. The tens of millions of magic circles that had been fully charged extinguished in an instant, and after all the energy was recovered, they gradually dissipated. However, he still had a blank expression on his face. Xian and the others appeared beside him. They looked around vigilantly, and then looked at the dark land that was constantly retreating. Xian frowned slightly. "Little star, did you see those things just now? You didn't do that, did you?" "It has nothing to do with me. I was holding back a big one, but I didn't even have the time to throw it out." Yun Nuoxing shook his head. Those monsters suddenly showed some order, and also a little bit of strategy. The huge spawns covered the small cannon fodder as they retreated, and they did not just throw away their armor and scatter. It was as if... Ming furrowed his silver-white eyebrows. It was as if they had suddenly turned from wild beasts into a disciplined army. The Dark Army is terrifying in the first place. If you come into close contact with them, you will easily be contaminated by the presence of the tide of darkness. If you use energy attacks from a distance, Most of them will be neutralized by the chaotic domain of the army. Normal energy attacks will not work at all. Fortunately, they have been in an irrational state, so they are easier to deal with. If they were all under control, I'm afraid that it would turn into a disaster. Yuan, she said with a deep voice. Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly. In the age of darkness, just brainlessly flattening the tide of darkness could destroy hundreds of billions of worlds. If they were disciplined and controlled, there would be no need to fight at all. As I expected, the small divine prefecture and the celestial realm are separated by a powerful barrier of the dark element. It has damaged the concept and space, causing a layer of void to appear between them. And the void fog has seeped into the buffer zone from the void and rushed into the small divine prefecture, or vice versa. And this time, it is not a small cluster of void fog that was accidentally thrown over like last time. This time, it is a big cluster of void fog. Yun Nuoshing frowned. Now, it was more or less certain that the bigger the void fog was, the more its power, variability, and damage it could cause would increase exponentially. The realm of darkness retreated 50,000 kilometers, only stopping when it was 150,000 kilometers away from the sacred stronghold. At this moment, standing at the edge of the city walls, the ominous darkness could no longer be seen. Only by flying high up in the sky could one see the darkness on the horizon and the darkness of the void. It was as if the two had merged into one. He did not think that this was safe. On the contrary, he felt a sense of crisis. The void fog was retreating, not choosing to fight to the death and preserving its power. Did this mean that this power still needed to be used for something else? They chose to retreat and reduce their destructive power. It was definitely not as simple as suddenly gaining intelligence, for example, waiting for reinforcements from the rear. That world fragment and then attacking from both sides to destroy the celestial realm? He felt that this was very likely. Although he wanted to get rid of the void fog in one fell swoop, now was not the best time. He needed to understand what had happened in the small divine prefecture. There was actually a large cluster of void fog entrenched here, and it was very likely that it had already gained intelligence. Perhaps it was it that lured the world fragment here? Perhaps the void fog here was just a road sign? Even if it was true, it was useless. If he had discovered it earlier and gotten rid of this road sign, perhaps the world fragment would not have come crashing over. Now that the Pillar of Creation's final defense had been activated, the impact was unavoidable, unless he could move the entire celestial realm away, but this was not realistic. Boss, there are many onlookers. Nightmare held the back of his head and said carelessly, and a considerable number of them are angry. Looking at them, it seems that they want to denounce us. Big Brother Yun dared to display such destructive power with hostility. TSK, what are these people thinking? Chu Qin could not help but mutter, speaking of which, we did not provoke them, right? It is said that any random reason in the small divine prefecture can cause a fight, so there is no need to think too much. If they want to fight, then let's fight. They are just a group of low-level gods. They are just relying on their age and the rules of the primordial era. Why should we be afraid of them? Yuan Shi grinned. Those who block the way will be beaten up. Those who don't block the way, let them be. Yun Nuoshing waved his hand, looking disinterested and tired after a battle. Let's find a place to rest. When it is time to get down to business, we still have to do it. As he spoke, he turned around and walked toward the sacred fortress, ignoring the thousands of gazes. He did not intend to go through the city gate. Just as he was about to land in the city from the sky, a group of figures suddenly walked over, looking aggressive. Oh, what a cliché plot. It seems that we really did not provoke them, right? Chu Chen whispered. So we don't have to care about the reason at all. Yuan Shi shrugged. Yun Nuoshing pretended not to see and kept floating forward. They also flew forward. When Yuan Shi saw that the distance was about right, he stopped Yun Nuoshing, cleared his throat, and said lightly, Are you here to show off your strength or your brains? Or are you here to show off the power behind you and warn us? Or do you have any valuable words to say? Why are you talking so much? Do you look like you are here to talk normally? Nightmare slapped him and looked at Yun Nuashing. Didn't the boss say that those who block the way should be killed? Oh. Yuan Shi nodded in realization. They did not lower their voices, so everyone in the sky heard them. Their expressions became slightly strange. However, when they thought of Yun Nuashing's exaggerated combat power, they felt that this farce was not worth watching and dispersed. Only that group of people stared at the former and the others aggressively. Let's go, don't waste time. Yun Nuashing yawned, waved his hand, and flew down. He flew past the group of lunatics blocking the way. He was too lazy to even think about killing those people. In the end, until Yun Nuashing and the others went around the side, the group of aggressive people did not make any movement. They only stared straight at the group of people and swept their eyes over them one by one. When they disappeared from their sight, they nodded their chins imperceptibly and turned around to leave silently. They did not say a single word during the entire process. The two groups of people left without saying a word after meeting each other. This surprised everyone. They thought that a fight would break out today. That group of people, Lin Xing, Yao Hua, and the others looked at the group of people who suddenly blocked their way without saying a word and frowned. The latter seemed to be deep in thought. He seemed to have seen that uniform red cloak and dark golden coat of arms somewhere before. They seemed to be a group of extremely dangerous people. Forget it, Little Star probably won't care about these boring fleas. Yao Hua waved his hand and looked at Yun Nuashing and the others who had landed in the city. He turned around and grinned at the others. However, those blind people don't seem to have seen us. Let's go over and say hello. Everyone chuckled and nodded. Chapter 11:24. Since it was just a short break, and finding a temporary place to stay in Sacred Fortress, it did not take much effort. These tasks were usually given to Yuan Shi or Nightmare, while the others were in charge of following them. It could not be helped. There were so many social trash in the group that it was a little scary. If it were not for the two of them, Yun Nuashing would probably create an invisible space and smash the palace down. Everyone believed that he was capable of doing such a thing. Yuan Shi and Nightmare soon found a suitable place to rest. It was a small pavilion. Those who wanted to rest could throw themselves on the bed after entering the room, while those who did not want to rest could go downstairs to find something to eat and ask around. They were both newcomers. Even if they had some information about Little Divine Land in their minds, it was only related to the Time Sand Sword and was not comprehensive. At this moment, the Divine Sword was still in the center of Little Divine Land and was being watched by countless people in turn. Even the small pavilion they found was not shabby. It was probably used to entertain the younger generation who came to Sacred Fortress. The scale of the accommodation and rest here was reasonable. The slightly dark color, the thick door of the training room, and the simple decorations in the living room were more or less relaxing. In any case, Yuan Shi and Nightmare lay down on the sofa and did not move as soon as they came in. They stretched and made strange noises, which made the others roll their eyes. Yun Nuashing walked to the window and raised his head to look outside. Sadly, he found that he was not tall enough. Just as he was about to find a stool, Shaoqing kindly handed him a stool and let him stand on it to look outside the window. This was his habitual action, and everyone who was familiar with him was familiar with this habit of his. Chu Yingzhan stretched and then remembered something. She looked at Yun Nuashing, who was standing by the window, and said, "Idiot, do you have any thoughts after feeling the laws of the ancient era again?" "Nothing much." Yun Nuashing turned around and glanced at her. She said indifferently, "The people who passed away in the past have already passed away. There are only 2 or 3 people left. There is nothing to lament about when they are no longer around. After all, it is the past. Isn't it appropriate for the souls of the dead from the far ancient era to feel the familiar rules again and return to their homeland? Everyone was stunned for a moment. It was only when Chu Yingzhan finished speaking to him that they suddenly remembered that this guy was extremely familiar with the rules of the ancient era. However, ever since he entered the buffer zone, he did not have much of a reaction. Yun Nuoxing smiled faintly. On the contrary, do you feel anything? This is the law of the primordial age, not the withered law of the outside world. The gods can barely use their own power to forcibly adjust the state of the law from the outside world to the state of the small divine land. They can barely cultivate with a bit of the light of the primordial age, but you can completely feel the power of that age. Yuan Shi, to be honest, I don't feel anything. That's normal. What's with that expression of yours? Do you think that in addition to activating the celestial fate, you will also be enlightened and have a major breakthrough? Yuan Shi laughed mockingly, and everyone knew that this guy was really dreaming. Everyone slumped on the sofa. Yun Nuoxing stood on a chair while little Qing hugged him from behind. After a comfortable 10 minutes, Yun Nuoxing stretched and said, "Phew. I've rested for a while. It's time to refresh myself and get down to business." "What? You're done resting?" Yuan Shi jumped up from the sofa. "You've been fighting for 8 hours. You just stood there for 10 minutes and you call that a break? I'm just emptying my brain and replenishing my spiritual power. I'm not as weak as you guys, complaining that I'm tired after 2 laps. My regularity has returned to this level, and I've also taken back that thing. My energy is close to infinite, at least for a short period of time." Yun Nuoxing looked at him with disdain. "Everyone! You're mocking us. Don't worry about these details." Yun Nuoxing waved her hand and snapped her fingers. The 10-meter square room suddenly expanded several times until it was almost the size of a small square. Then, a model made of energy lines appeared in front of everyone. It was the model of the celestial realm. Everyone was familiar with it, but they were a little curious as to why this model was brought out in this place. This was the celestial realm, and it was isolated from the outside world. But soon, their doubts were cleared. Yun Nuoxing just raised her chin, and the model quickly changed. First, 5 huge magic circles appeared above the celestial realm model. Then, the 5 regions separated with the 5 magic circles. The celestial realm and its corresponding chaos formation did not move, but their line of sight shrank a lot. In a few breaths' time, they plunged into the barrier of the celestial realm. The model's appearance also changed in an instant, and another huge floating continent appeared. It was actually the interior of the celestial realm. The observer's eye can see everything in the celestial realm. It's just as easy for me to see the celestial realm. As long as it still belongs to the celestial realm, there won't be a problem. Yun Nuoxing clenched his fists. Just as he was about to continue speaking, a series of knocks came from the door, causing him to be stunned. Everyone also abruptly regained their senses. One by one, they pressed down on the weapons in their hands, revealing a vigilant expression. Nightmare leaped to the side of the door, grabbed the long sword in his hand, and said in a low voice, "Who is it?" A voice cleared her throat outside the door, and then said with a smile, "It's one of us, Nightmare. Hurry up and open the door, we're here to visit our relatives." "To hell with visiting your relatives. Don't just casually call them relatives, okay? Hey, our grand ancestor is inside. What's wrong with saying that we're visiting our relatives? How many times do I have to tell you that if you call yourself the grand ancestor of Little Star, you'll be killed? I think it's better to have a proper conversation and open the door first. You're blocking the corridor by crowding the door." "It's fine, I already thought of this situation, so only 1/3 of us came. Let's not talk about this. Little Star, hurry up and open the door, the community is sending warmth. Everyone!" Suddenly, they didn't feel like opening the door. The corners of Nightmare's eyes twitched for a while, and after hesitating for a while, he still opened the door. The people outside instantly popped their heads out. Aha! Little Star hasn't seen you in a long time. F***ck. What is this? What are you doing here? An underground secret organization? Are you discussing the plan to conquer Little Divine Land? Did we come at the wrong time? Wah wah wah. Is it too late for us to back out now? We just need to discuss something, erase our memories, don't kill us, okay? Yao Hua barged in, and as soon as he popped his head out, he saw Yun Nuoshing and the others surrounding the strategic map with serious expressions. They looked like they were going to attack wherever Yao Hua pointed. He instantly broke out in a cold sweat, and he yelled and was about to rush out. Nightmare slapped this lunatic to quiet down, then threw him into the room. You want to leave after boarding the pirate ship? Behind him, Jin Ing, Lin Sheng, Jun Luo Yi, Ding Mingyu, and the others silently looked at each other, then looked at the smirking Nightmare. They calculated their combat strength, then consciously rushed into the room. Jokes aside, when they rushed into the room, they saw the huge model of Little Divine Land, and it was an unusually clear model of Little Divine Land. It even marked out every nook and cranny, what size of city, and hidden places, such as twisted and folded hidden spaces, as well as a high-energy reaction target, which was an extremely bright light spot. They all subconsciously thought that this big boss was going to do something. It was no wonder that Yao Hua thought that they were going to conquer Little Divine Land. Yao Hua walked over obediently, and just as he was about to greet the person standing at the head of the table, he was stunned when he saw the big loli in front of him. He looked at Xian in a daze. I haven't seen you for a few days, and your daughter is already so big. Two blue veins popped out on Yun Nuoshing's forehead. She jumped off the bench and kicked him to the ceiling. I'm your ancestor. Everyone thought about it. This sentence was actually a statement. Wasn't this big boss in front of them the ancestor of the 9 divine temples? Seeing his cute and petite appearance, and hearing his tone, Jin Ing finally confirmed that this big loli was actually Yun Nuoshing. She couldn't help but reach out and touch his hair. Little Star, how did you become like this? There's a reason. Yun Nuoshing lowered her head in distress, but did not shake off Jin Ying's hand. She sighed and nodded to the people who came in. Well, it's been a long time. Although it's only been half a year, well, let's not talk about this first. You guys watch from the side, and I'll catch up when I'm done. Hearing her words, Lin Sheng and the others, who had a lot to say, suddenly fell silent. They stood aside and looked at the huge energy model with curious eyes. For a moment, they couldn't figure out what she was doing. Yun Nuoshing waved her hand, and energy beams shot out from the protective array and connected them to each other. Only by magnifying the energy beams could they see the original appearance of the array. It was a dense array of small arrays. From a distance, it looked like a long blurry line. Yao Hua fell from the ceiling with difficulty. He patted the dust off his body, looked at the 5 arrays, and couldn't help but say, "What is this? I seem to have some impression, but I don't really remember." Yuanshi glanced at him, remembering that he had seen the chaos array in the temple, and said, "It's a protective array. Didn't Little Star tell you about it? Now that it's been repaired, he can use this thing to judge an enemy from any corner. It won't be a problem for him to kill the gods." Yao Hua and the others suddenly looked serious. They felt as if they had heard something very important, but it was better not to say too much now. Although the others were shocked, they didn't say anything when they saw Yun Nuoshing's serious look. Yun Nuoshing frowned. He looked at the model of Little Divine Land for a while, and his cheeks twitched. How could I forget about the annoying things here? It's so annoying. I keep bumping into you guys everywhere. Xian was just about to ask what was going on when he saw Yun Nuoshing waving his hand. The brightness of the model of Little Divine Land decreased a little, and many balls of light suddenly lit up in the depths of the earth. Some were unusually bright, and some were relatively dim. The former was probably not far away from breaking the seal, and the latter was still sleeping soundly. Even if thunder struck, they wouldn't wake up. When they saw those balls of light, Ziyin, Yuan Shi, and the others all slapped their foreheads in unison. Their faces were filled with stomachache. These things were really, damn it, these big guys are really haunting us. I thought I wouldn't see these ugly things in Little Divine Land. Nightmare sucked in a breath of cold air until his teeth hurt. Ming counted carefully. 21. 6 of them are on the verge of breaking the seal, and the rest will probably take some time. Yun Nuoshing slapped the space. Damn. I didn't come here to do this. Seeing that they suddenly became gloomy, Yao Hua couldn't help but ask, "What are you guys talking about?" Chu Chen thought for a while, then said, "We're talking about something very dangerous. You guys have been here for 3 months, and you just haven't encountered the turmoil during this period. The realm of the gods is surging, and something big is about to happen." Yuan Shi glanced at Yao Hua and said. Before Yao Hua could react, Yun Nuoshing's face darkened, and he laughed gloomily. This despairing world should be destroyed. As he spoke, he suddenly raised his right hand. The 5-piece Great Guardian formation emitted a brilliant and dazzling light, as if it had already accepted the summoning of its master. An energy that could destroy heaven and earth. Before it could explode, the people beside him reacted in time. Ziyin pounced forward and pressed down on his hands. Little Qing and Ming Ming also cooperated with her to press Yun Nuoshing onto the ground. Yuan Shi swiftly rushed over and grabbed Yun Nuoshing's chin. She took out a large number of medicinal pills and stuffed them into his mouth with all her might. "Quick! Eat them! Open your mouth and eat the pills! Quickly wake up! Hold on to your original intentions! Don't lose yourself!" Everyone was furious. This guy's original intention was to destroy the realm of the gods, okay? Hold his hands down, don't let him swing them down. Disperse, disperse. Why did the model turn off? Damn, the guardian formations are accumulating energy. The patient is struggling. He's resisting the pills. Water. Bring water. Don't pour it into Brother Yun's nose. Who's going to interrupt his formation? Get out of the way. Let me do it. Ming pushed everyone away and held Yun Nuoshing down, then raised his head and slammed it down. A sonic boom directly exploded here. Boom. The heavy sound made everyone grimace, and they couldn't bear to look at it directly. They only had time to say in their hearts, "It's coming, it's coming." This is the second angel's head bash. Damn it, his head is smashing at supersonic speed. When the two heads collided together, the onlookers felt like their heads were going to split open. This girl's head is really fierce. Yao Hua, Lin Xing, and the others stared at the scene in front of them with their mouths agape. When the dust settled and the model and the magic circle dissipated, the group of people was still in a daze. They looked at each other, not knowing what had happened. In their hearts, they felt like they had escaped death. At this time, seeing that the formation dissipated, Ming climbed up shakily. She held her red forehead with one hand and tears in her eyes. Ugh, it hurts. Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How could a supersonic head bash not hurt? Yun Nuoshing finally stabilized. She slowly climbed up with a swaying head, then touched the big bump on her forehead and sighed. "Girl, you want to kill me, right? I just saw a crack in the reincarnation road." Ming's pretty face was so red that it was about to bleed. She quickly shrank her head and hid behind Ziyin, even folding her wings behind her back. Yun Nuoshing gasped and touched the big bump on her forehead. Her eyes were almost squeezed out. It was really lucky that this girl could avoid the star bead hitting her forehead. "Why do you like to bash your head like Liuli?" Ming laughed dryly. Her body was about to dissipate into a ball of light. Yuan Shi wiped his sweat and heaved a sigh of relief. Calming down physically is indeed much faster than pouring medicine. After forcing himself to calm down for a few minutes, Yun Nuoshing repeatedly promised that he wouldn't be impulsive before unfolding the model of Little Divine Land. However, it didn't matter whether he promised or not. At this moment, he was in Little Qing's arms. The gazes of the people in the room were as strange as they could be, so he could only focus on the model and try his best to ignore those gazes. He didn't even have time to think about taking action. After concentrating for a while, the model of Little Divine Land changed again. Streaks of light descended from the chaos array in the sky, condensing into two cloud-like chaotic balls of light that fell in two places. Everyone stared at the two balls of light without blinking. One ball of light was suspended above Little Divine Land, while the other was floating in the air. Moreover, it looked very strange. It was almost split into two halves, and only a few energy threads were still connected. It floated in the sky above Little Divine Land and swayed forward along a track. The track was even marked with energy threads. It was an ellipse, but it wasn't very regular. There were some obvious deviations in some places, like a cramping satellite. These two, are they two special places or two special things? Xian asked. Yun Nuoshing stretched out his hand and froze for a moment. He realized that his hand wasn't long enough, so he had to use the starlight silver spear to point at the ball of light on the ground. This is the collection point of the Guardian Array. It's a surface control area, and also the control center of the secondary energy. Most of the energy flows through this point. I can control it as I wish, and when necessary, I can control 100% of the energy. This collection point isn't always fixed in one place. It will also move in the realm of the gods, but it's easy for me to find it. The other one is the Dark Temple. Before he could finish his words, Qin Yan spoke first. The mysterious ruins of the temple wandering in Little Divine Land. Since there's a track, it should be the Dark Temple. Yun Nuoshing glanced at her and nodded. Yuan Shi was a little confused. Then what does this broken ball of light mean? The Dark Temple. The ruins of the Dark Temple wander in the gap between the void and the realm of the gods. Half of it is in the void, and the other half is in the realm of the gods. This is just a way to mark it. Feng looked at the map of Little Divine Land thoughtfully. We have a target now. The center of Little Divine Land and the other side is probably the east? Who knows? Little Divine Land doesn't seem to have a mark. Up north, down south, left, west, right, east. Just look to the right. Nightmare spread his hands. Everyone, Little Divine Land shares the sky and time of the realm of the gods. Yun Nuoshing glanced at him and looked up with a dazed expression. But the sky here is still the sky of the primordial era. It hasn't changed at all. The sky of the primordial era? Two suns overlap. That's the sky of the primordial era. What you see now is two suns side by side. If you stand in the east and look to the west, or vice versa, you can see two suns on the left and right, one higher and one lower. There are even some differences in size. But in the primordial era, no matter how you look, you can only see one sun because the two suns are exactly the same, and they are quite close to each other. If you don't go to the star field, you will never recognize that they are actually two suns. I can tell at a glance. How nostalgic. Yun Nuoshing let out a long sigh. The rules of the primordial era are maintained here, and the sky of the primordial era is maintained here. Only time moves forward, and nothing is left behind. He sensed that the atmosphere was a little gloomy, so he waved his hand and said to Little Moon and the others, Fairy, you two break through to the primordial god level first. The 7 trillion seal is easy to break. Just think about it yourselves. What about you? Feng looked at him. Yun Nuoshing rubbed his bangs, pondered for a moment, and nodded. I'll go and prepare too. Chapter 11:25. Night always fell silently. When one's attention was elsewhere, they could only feel their vision getting darker and darker. Unknowingly, they would light up a crystal lamp, and only then would they realize, oh, it's night again. It's about time for the nightlife. This was the thought of the young people. Night was never peaceful. The elderly would return to their rooms early to rest, and the old cultivators would enter a state of cultivation, leaving behind a group of young people to sing and dance in the brightly lit areas until dawn. The blockade line of Sacred Stronghold, located at the front line of the chaos, was actually a small city run by ordinary people. However, it was maintained by cultivators, and most of the people who came and went were powerful cultivators. But cultivators were still people, at least most of them were. Except for a few who had seen through the mundane world, the others also needed to relax and rest. They needed a place of peace and comfort, which was why Sacred Stronghold was turned into a small city. At night, 3 moons hung high in the sky. The blue, red, and yellow moons told everyone with incomparable reality that this was not the realm of the gods. Even if they used the time of the realm of the gods, and the celestial bodies rose from the east and set in the west, at least the sky here did not look like the realm of the gods. Newcomers to the small divine land would be shocked, as they had never seen a third moon. That's the spirit moon, said to be a palace built by the god of the moon. It was bigger than the other 2 moons, and it came out every night to shine on the earth. However, it was destroyed at the end of the ancient era. Burp. How could I be wrong? I'm the night cat god. Burp. How could I be wrong about this? Under the moonlight, in a very spacious pavilion on a short mountain, a group of people were holding wine jars and wine jugs and toasting each other. They were drunk and had their arms around each other's shoulders as they talked loudly and laughed loudly. Even though there was a small house a mile away from the short mountain, they were not worried about disturbing anyone. There was a soundproof array here, so no matter how lively it was, there would be no problem. Nightmare reeked of alcohol. She was still holding a wine jug in her hand. Her face was ruddy and she looked drunk. She shouted at Yun Nuoshing, who was standing by the hill at the edge of the pavilion. Yun Nuoshing waved his hand in silent agreement. However, it did not matter if he did not answer. Nightmare had already returned to the gazebo with the wine jug. He could not help but shake his head. The smell of alcohol was too strong, and it was a little uncomfortable to be so close to it. He did not stop this extravagant activity from Shi Guang's point of view. He was nervous for no reason, but he did not need to bring everyone with him. After hearing what Lin Sheng and the others said, he felt that this was indeed the time to relax. Is that so? The past 3 months haven't been easy for you guys either. Lin Sheng, Yao Hua, Ding Mingyu, Jun Luoyi and the others stood beside her. Yun Nuoshing listened carefully to them talk about the big and small things that had happened in the past 3 months, including the buffer zone and the realm of darkness. It's dangerous, but it's nothing compared to what you're busy with. Yao Hua casually bumped him with his shoulder. He poured himself a glass of wine and took a sip. Then he sighed. I heard from Yuan Shi and the others that there's something going on in the realm of the gods? Yes, they didn't tell you in detail? Yun Nuoshing nodded. No, he just said that if we want to know, we can ask you directly. Yun Nuoshing smiled faintly and looked into the distance. On another hill, Little Moon, Yur Chu Chen, and Chu Xianling were busy leveling up to lower celestial. The 7 trillion seal had only delayed their leveling up. Now that they finally got what they wanted, and after the seal was lifted, the time needed to level up would be shortened by a lot. After a while, he looked away and saw that Yao Hua and the others were curious. He sighed softly and said, Indeed, a lot of things have happened. Some of them are even old debt. It's so old that history will fade. What exactly happened? Yao Hua scratched his head. Yun Nuoshing glanced at him. Actually, you don't have to worry about it. Although it's very important, if you don't know about it, it won't affect you. Jun Luo-yi blinked. Do you want me to call Xian over? Of course, you have the right to know about these big things. You'll know about it sooner or later. Telling you now will give you some mental preparation. Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yun Nuoshing organized his words and softly told them about the big things that had happened in the realm of the gods, or the big things that were big enough to shock the realm of the gods. Yao Hua and the others spat out a mouthful of wine at least 10 meters away. Yun Nuoshing had already expected this and took a step to the side. Then, he was hit in the face by a passing little magic. The smell of wine on the ball made him roll his eyes. Jining was a little dazed. The wine in the jug by her mouth spilled onto the ground. Mu Ling flicked her long hair and looked at him helplessly. Why do you always have to run into these things? Yun Nuoshing took the drunken ball off his face and put it on his head. Hearing this, he couldn't help but sigh and spread his hands. You shouldn't say this to me. You should say to the realm of the gods, damn it, why are you so troublesome? This isn't troublesome. Lin Xing calmly took a sip of wine. As soon as he put down the jug, his face turned pale. This is life-threatening. Life-threatening? You don't have to do anything. Look at this world. It's so peaceful and peaceful. You can't feel anything. Yun Nuoshing sighed. You can't feel the collapse of the demon world's barrier. You can't feel the awakening of world-class beings. You can't feel the void fog and the tide of darkness. You can't feel it when the disaster has already happened. By the time you know something, death has already come knocking on your door. Lin Xing smiled bitterly. He couldn't help but look at the horizon. It was the direction of the realm of darkness. There was something entrenched there. The people who lived in Sacred Fortress called it the origin of darkness. Now he knew that it was the place where the void fog was entrenched. That thing had destroyed thousands of worlds and could even kill a celestial. Shui Xia came to Yun Nuoshing's side and looked at him with watery eyes. Little star, what do you want to do? Me? What can I do? I'm a half-crippled celestial. Even the ultimate ascension might not be useful. Yun Nuoshing sighed deeply. He raised his right hand and clenched it a few times. I've protected the realm of gods for more than 70 eras. Although most of the time it was the backup plan I left behind that operated, and it could be considered as my work. But what's the use? I've never thought about what I would do if I had to face this kind of enemy one day. I've pursued the Dark Ages, looking for the mythological era that had disappeared. Until one day, one of them suddenly materialized and smashed into my face. I was so confused that I couldn't find the center of the void. At that time, I could only raise a finger to greet them and say, "Screw you." Everyone was speechless. It was hard to say how much of an impact it would have when one's pursuit of history suddenly became reality. Wait a minute. What does this have to do with those 2 eras? Yao Hua scratched his head. Didn't I say? Yun Nuoshing was stunned. He thought for a moment and confirmed that he hadn't said anything. I don't think so. Then let me say something. The Void Mist and the Dark Army behind it that I told you about just now, they overturned the entire De Yuan realm during the Dark Ages. Everyone. This time, everyone in the pavilion choked. They looked at him in horror. A few seconds later, there was a commotion. Everyone instantly sobered up and surrounded him. Xian and Ming were the first to grab him. They asked in unison, "What's going on? I didn't hear you mention it." "Oh, I didn't tell you?" Yun Nuoshing paused for a second, then carefully thought about it. "Yeah, I didn't tell you guys because there was too much time, so I didn't tell you guys. That's fine, I'll take this opportunity to tell you guys. Binger, don't drink anymore, your protective cold air has the smell of alcohol." It didn't take long for him to fill in the details about the underworld. Since he had already said so much, it would only take him a few minutes to add another matter. After he finished, Yun Nuoshing calmly stepped aside, leaving the group of people who were completely petrified. He walked slowly to the side. They would have to talk about this matter by themselves for a long time. Yun Nuoxing walked to the other side of the short mountain and looked at the starry sky that had remained unchanged for 70 eras. He sighed deeply. He was a little surprised that he had said those words unintentionally. Was it really unintentional? He smiled silently. It was probably unintentional. After he said those words, he felt a little more relaxed. Although there was no progress in the matter, yes, it was unintentional like that. Because of the great pressure he was under, he unintentionally said those words. He just felt that it was not something he would do with his personality. He probably wouldn't have been able to do it in the past. After all, he had changed. He was letting his imagination run wild again. Recently, his mind had been going on a rampage more and more often. It was difficult for him to concentrate. It was as if he was running away from something. He subconsciously avoided something. He couldn't help but laugh at himself. It was unbelievable. There was a rustling sound behind him. Light footsteps rubbed against the ground gently, pulling him back from his wandering thoughts. He turned around and saw Jun Luo-yi, who was wearing a long white dress, walking towards him quietly. When she saw that he had noticed her, she quickened her pace. "I didn't expect you to come here first." Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but laugh. He thought that Xian and the others would come back to their senses first, notice that he was missing, and quickly find him. Jun Luo-yi walked in front of Yun Nuoxing and slowly lowered her head to look at him. After a while, she couldn't help but laugh. "Look at your height now. You're quite cute." Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes at her. He didn't know why this overly intelligent girl came over. "What's wrong? The news you heard was too exaggerated. Are you here to find some mental comfort?" Jun Luo-yi shook her head and looked at him deeply. "I saw that you didn't seem to be in the right state of mind. I was a little concerned." Yun Nuoxing was slightly stunned. After a while, he shrugged. "What? Those in your family didn't notice. Even though they care a lot about you and are always looking at you, the news you just brought was too shocking. They didn't react for a while and didn't notice it." Jun Luo-yi looked at him and suddenly reached out to brush his bangs to the side. "You didn't notice it yourself. Your current expression is very scary." She added in her heart, "Very scary." His back was illuminated by the tricolored moonlight, and his face was hidden in the faint shadows. His eyes were frighteningly bright, and the smile on his lips was a mixture of evil charm and evil. He didn't know it himself, but she had noticed it. From the moment he started talking about the shocking information, his expression had changed slightly, and now it had become this extremely twisted appearance, as if he was crazy and laughing at the same time. "You have a lot of preparations in your heart. You have a lot of plans. Maybe you chose the most appropriate one, but it's the most dangerous one for you. It's just like my expression when I was ready to become the enemy of the entire Xian-Long continent. I put all my eggs in one basket, disregarded everything, and didn't care about any additional consequences for that goal." Jun Luo-yi slowly squatted down and looked into his eyes. "Your eyes are very nostalgic. They let me see myself in the past." "Then you changed," Yun Nuoxing said softly. "Because I don't need that kind of eyes anymore." Jun Luo-yi said softly, "My life now is pretty good. I run all over the world, and there are thrills and rewards. Master and the others are also living well in this world. We are no longer restricted by heaven, and I'm no longer living in prison. I even made a group of friends who are silly when they talk to each other. They are all trustworthy friends who don't have that kind of goal that oppresses my nerve. Naturally, I don't need that kind of thing anymore. But you will drive yourself crazy." Her tone suddenly changed, and even became a little serious. Yun Nuoxing chuckled. "Little girl, do you think I need you to teach me a lesson? The time I spend thinking is more than all the data you've collected in your life. I know how to measure everything. But you didn't put yourself on the other end of the scale. Because I can't put myself on it. The one who should be standing on the other end of the scale isn't me." Jun Luo-yi was stunned and frowned. She didn't understand what he meant for a moment, but she seemed to have understood something. You chose it yourself." Yun Nuashing clenched his fists, and a crazed look flashed across his eyes. Then, he regained his calm in an instant, as if nothing had changed. "I was already prepared. At any moment, as long as the most serious situation happened, I would be able to react. However, my words won't work. Because it's me, it won't work. They are going to deal with the heavenly god of primal chaos of the 70 eras, the heavenly god who is known as a taboo by the entire era, not me." He sighed and patted Jun Luoyi's hair. "Go back. I'll rest here for a while and think about life. The people you should care about and the places you should care about are all there. Don't ask anything, don't say anything. Go back." Jun Luoyi looked deeply at him, then stood up and turned around to leave. It seemed like she really didn't want to ask anything. Yun Nuashing looked at her slender back and shook his head helplessly. This woman was even more clever than Xian and the others. Although it was true that he didn't control his facial expression, it wasn't because of this. It wasn't because he didn't control himself. Jun Luoyi's light footsteps suddenly stopped. She turned around and smiled at him. She said with a hint of playfulness, "Mr. Yun, you're wrong about something. The people I care about, not just on that side." Jun Luoyi left behind these words and then nimbly disappeared around the corner. Yun Nuashing stood there in a daze for a moment. He pondered over her words and thought about the other people they had left behind in Xiaoguang City or other places. He guessed what she meant and couldn't help but mutter, "This girl probably didn't understand what I meant. Forget it, there was no need to say such things out loud. Let's just mind our own business." Many things were like this. The more he thought about it, the more he thought about it. The more he talked about it, the more chaotic it became. Even so, he still couldn't stop thinking about it. He couldn't stop thinking about it. However, before his mind collapsed, he had to do something serious. For example, it was time to cross the hurdle that was right in front of him. "I actually have to experience the first leap of elementary God again." He smiled silently. Darkness, light, order, chaos, no attributes. The 5 attributes of elementary God were only one type of attribute and one type of attribute. It didn't mean that one's temperament would change greatly after choosing one. Those who embraced darkness could still care about the common people and save the world. Those who walked into light could also destroy the world with a single hand. The 5 attributes didn't have any mutual promotion or suppression. To put it bluntly, it was just a matter of compatibility. The only thing that mattered was the form of energy expression. As Yun Nuashing thought about it, she suddenly realized why there were no such things in this era. Even if no one used this method to change their own form of energy, even the gods who were born in this era could count their own form of energy into the 5 types of energy. It was just that they did not join the system and abandoned the original unified system, and walked their own path without restriction. That's right, in the end, the division of the 5 types of energy was just a cultivation system. Since the ancient times, there were countless cultivation systems, and even the realm of the gods' own cultivation system had changed over and over again. Since it was a cultivation system that was set by generations of people, it naturally could be changed and replaced. There was an 80% chance that the elementary god's energy classification of elementary god had been eliminated. Perhaps someone had created a more efficient way to eliminate the elementary god's energy classification. It wasn't necessarily a matter of which was better or worse. The entire elementary god stage was to prepare for the elementary god stage. These matters concerned the elementary god stage. He needed to start calculating now. However, he didn't seem to have much to calculate. The seed of darkness had been born. Although the divine body of soul receiving was on the side of light and order, it was also possible to walk the opposite path. There weren't too many restrictions. Perhaps he could also give up the path of elementary God and walk a new path in this era. Chaos, order. What should I choose? Should I walk the old path, or start over and walk a new path? Or Yun Nuashing sat cross-legged in the stone chamber. Beside him was a whistling energy. He lowered his head and looked at his little palm that was brushed by all kinds of energy. His eyes reflected a myriad of colors. He didn't know whether it was efficient or not. However, there was a saying that everything had to be suitable. The most suitable one didn't necessarily have to be the fastest or the best. It also didn't mean that the harder it was, the better it was. The road was long, and whoever walked to the end would have the last laugh. Plop. The black seed that was trapped in his soul began to emit a deep and dark light under the urging of a thought. A wave of energy that made one's heart palpitate flowed past. However, in that absolute darkness, there were other things mixed and flowed within it. A bit of golden light was like the light of the firmament that pierced through the curtain of night. The origin of the divine body of soul receiving was urged. Yun Nuashing made a hand seal. Countless silk threads appeared out of nowhere from his body. They grew, spread, and finally pierced into the walls of the stone chamber. He was also entangled by the dense silk thread. Before the pair of colorful eyes were about to close, a wisp of darkness, a wisp of light, and a lot of very complicated information flowed past him. He probably had a choice long ago. However, when he really made this choice, he was still shocked. He was shocked by his own indifference and calmness. He made this decision so decisively and calmly. It was as if the person affected wasn't him but someone else. All origins and endings in this world are allowed, and I will go against the current and search for the origin. The light cocoon gradually closed. Colorful light flowed out of the cocoon. It was incomparably beautiful. The indistinct prayer pierced through the obstruction of time and drilled out of the void. It was like a big bell that reverberated in this small stone chamber. On top of the mysterious altar was a huge light cocoon. Endless star areas, endless lives. All of this was an illusion, but it also seemed real. This was a path of no return. He walked on it fearlessly towards the destined destruction. There was no turning back. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.